for the subsequent sessions from across India and the world, ensuring a rich and multifaceted discussion. The webinar brings together honorable ministers, senior officials, academicians, industry leaders, students, representatives from diverse sectors today, particularly from education, health, hospitality, and sports. Now, each of these stakeholders will be sharing their unique perspectives, experiences, and expertise, creating an environment of meaningful dialogue and knowledge exchange. By engaging voices from such varied backgrounds, the sessions are designed to foster collaboration, generate innovative ideas, and provide holistic insights into topics under consideration. The impact of these sessions, as expected, will be far-reaching. They are designed to foster joint preparations that draws on both global best practices as well as local experiences, ensuring that diverse expertise is effectively utilized. They will also enable credible action to remove bottlenecks, address challenges that are typically encountered during implementation, thereby strengthening the delivery of these flagship reforms. Most importantly, these sessions will facilitate timely completion of all preparatory measures so that execution can begin in earnest, translating vision into results and ensuring that benefits of the union budget reach the people swiftly and effectively. This webinar is a reaffirmation of our shared commitment to Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, and Sabka Prayas, building a future where governance is participatory, development is inclusive, and every citizen's aspiration finds fulfillment. इस वेबिनार में विभिन्न मंत्रालयों में आयोजित ब्रेकआउट सत्र होंगे। उच्च शिक्षा विभाग के अंतर्गत 5 सत्र, पर्यटन मंत्रालय के अंतर्गत 4 सत्र तथा स्वास्थ्य और परिवार कल्याण मंत्रालय के अंतर्गत 7 सत्र हैं। ये सत्र नवाचार और सहयोग के सशक्त माध्यम के रूप में कार्य करेंगे। इन सत्रों में विविध पृष्ठभूमियों से आए पैनलिस्ट और प्रतिभागी भाग लेंगे, जिससे समृद्ध और बहुआयामी चर्चा सुनिश्चित की जाएगी। इस आयोजन में मंत्रीगण, शिक्षाविद, छात्र, शिक्षा, स्वास्थ्य, पर्यटन क्षेत्र के प्रतिनिधि, कॉर्पोरेट जगत के नेता, सरकारी संगठनों के अधिकारी तथा अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संस्थानों के प्रतिनिधि भी शामिल होंगे। ये सभी स्टेक होल्डर्स अपनी विशिष्ट दृष्टिकोण, अनुभव, विशेषज्ञता साझा करेंगे, जिससे सार्थक संवाद और ज्ञान के आदान प्रदान का वातावरण तैयार होगा।
माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी, मंत्रिपरिषद के माननीय सदस्यगण, विभिन्न मंत्रालयों एवं विभागों के अधिकारीगण, उद्योग जगत के प्रतिनिधि, शिक्षाविद तथा इस वेबिनार से जुड़े सभी प्रतिभागी, आप सभी को मेरा सादर नमस्कार। सबका साथ सबका विकास, फुलफिलिंग एस्पिरेशंस ऑफ पीपल की भावना से प्रेरित इस पोस्ट बजट वेबिनार में आप सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत करते हुए मुझे अत्यंत प्रसन्नता हो रही है। आज आयोजित इस वेबिनार में शिक्षा, स्वास्थ्य, पर्यटन तथा आतिथ्य से संबंधित कुल 22 बजट घोषणाओं पर विस्तार से विचार विमर्श किया जाएगा। इसके लिए 16 ब्रेकआउट सेशन निर्धारित किए गए हैं, जिसमें लगभग 193 विशेषज्ञ भाग लेंगे। यह बजट वर्ष 2047 के विकसित भारत के हम सभी के संकल्पों को साकार करने की दिशा में एक महत्वपूर्ण कदम है, जो समावेशी विकास और नए अवसरों का मार्ग प्रशस्त करेगा। अब मैं माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी से विनम्र निवेदन करता हूं कि वे इस अवसर पर हम सभी को अपना मार्गदर्शन दें और हमें आगे बढ़ने की प्रेरणा प्रदान करें। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी।
साथियों, बजट के बाद वेबिनार की इस सीरीज में आज ये चौथा और अहम वेबिनार है। फुलफिलिंग एस्पिरेशंस ऑफ पीपल, यानी जन आकांक्षाओं की पूर्ति। ये केवल एक चर्चा का विषय नहीं है, ये इस बजट का मूल ध्येय है और इस सरकार का संकल्प भी है। इन जन आकांक्षाओं की पूर्ति का बहुत बड़ा माध्यम एजुकेशन, स्किल, हेल्थ, टूरिज्म, स्पोर्ट, कल्चर, ऐसे मूलभूत सेक्टर्स हैं। इसलिए इस वेबिनार में हम इन महत्वपूर्ण आयामों पर चर्चा कर रहे हैं। बजट घोषणाओं के इम्प्लीमेंटेशन के लिए इन विषयों से जुड़े सभी एक्सपर्ट्स, पॉलिसी मेकर्स और स्कॉलर्स, एंटरप्रेन्योर्स और मेरे युवा साथी, आप सभी के विचार और सुझाव बहुत अहम है। मैं आप सभी का इस चौथे बजट वेबिनार के इस सत्र में स्वागत करता हूं, अभिनंदन करता हूं। साथियों, भारत आज प्रिवेंटिव और होलिस्टिक हेल्थ के लिए एक विशाल विजन पर काम कर रहा है। पिछले कुछ वर्षों में देश का हेल्थ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर मजबूत हुआ है। सैकड़ों जिलों में नए नए मेडिकल कॉलेज खुल गए हैं। आयुष्मान भारत योजना, आरोग्य मंदिरों के माध्यम से स्वास्थ्य सेवाओं की पहुंच गांव गांव तक बढ़ाई गई है। हमारे योग और आयुर्वेद पूरी दुनिया में पॉपुलर हो रहे हैं। आप सभी इसके विभिन्न पहलुओं पर संवाद अवश्य करेंगे, लेकिन एक अहम विषय जिसका मैं जिक्र करना चाहूंगा वो है केयर इकोनॉमी। आने वाले दशक में देश में सीनियर सिटीजन्स की संख्या तेजी से बढ़ेगी। इसके अलावा आज वर्तमान में दुनिया के कई देशों में केयर गिवर्स की भारी मांग है। इसलिए अब हेल्थ सेक्टर में लाखों युवाओं के लिए नई स्किल आधारित रोजगार के नए अवसर तैयार हो रहे हैं। मैं इस वेबिनार में उपस्थित हेल्थ सेक्टर के एक्सपर्ट से आग्रह करूंगा वो नए ट्रेनिंग मॉडल्स और पार्टनरशिप विकसित करने पर सुझाव दें, ताकि देश में ट्रेनिंग इकोसिस्टम और ज्यादा मजबूत हो सके। साथियों, इसी से जुड़ा दूसरा विषय टेलीमेडिसिन का है। आज बड़ी संख्या में दूर दराज के क्षेत्र के लोग भी इसका लाभ उठा रहे हैं और विश्वास बढ़ता चला जा रहा है। लेकिन मैं समझता हूं इसमें अब भी जागरूकता और सहजता बढ़ाए जाने की बहुत जरूरत है। साथियों, पिछले एक दशक में देश के माइंडसेट में एक बड़ा परिवर्तन आया है। आज गांव, कस्बा, शहर की सीमाओं से परे भारत का हर युवा कुछ नया करना चाहता है। उसमें कुछ कर गुजरने का जज्बा है। नई पीढ़ी का ये नया माइंडसेट देश की सबसे बड़ी ताकत है, उज्जवल भविष्य की सबसे बड़ी पूंजी है। इसे कैपिटलाइज करने के लिए हमें अपने एजुकेशन सिस्टम को निरंतर आधुनिक बनाए रखना, अपग्रेड करते ही रहना है। नई एजुकेशन पॉलिसी ने इसके लिए जरूरी बेस तैयार कर दिया है। अब बहुत आवश्यक है कि हमारे करिकुलम मार्केट की जरूरतों के हिसाब से अपडेटेड रहे। हमें हमारे एजुकेशन सिस्टम को रियल वर्ल्ड इकोनॉमी से जोड़ने की प्रक्रिया को और तेज करनी होगी। एआई और ऑटोमेशन, डिजिटल इकोनॉमी और डिजाइन ड्रिवन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग, ऐसे विषयों पर हमें फोकस और बढ़ाना होगा। साथियों, देश में एजुकेशन को एम्प्लॉयमेंट और एंटरप्राइज से जोड़ने की दिशा में लगातार काम हो रहा है। यूनिवर्सिटी टाउनशिप जैसे नए मॉडल्स में हमारे इसी अप्रोच का प्रतिबिंब है। आज भारत एवीजीसी सेक्टर यानी एनिमेशन, विजुअल इफेक्ट्स, गेमिंग और कॉमिक्स को बढ़ावा दे रहा है। भारत इनोवेशन ड्रिवन इकोनॉमी की ओर बढ़ रहा है। आज इस वेबिनार में देश के अनेक शिक्षाविद और एकेडमिक इंस्टीट्यूशंस जुड़े हैं। मैं आपसे आग्रह करूंगा कि इस वेबिनार में अपने कैंपस को इंडस्ट्री कोलैबोरेशन और रिसर्च ड्रिवन लर्निंग उसको केंद्र के रूप में विकसित करने की दिशा में जरूर मंथन हो। इससे स्टूडेंट्स को रियल वर्ल्ड एक्सपोजर मिलेगा और स्किल इकोसिस्टम और मजबूत होगा। साथियों, एक बहुत अहम विषय है स्टेम यानी साइंस, टेक्नोलॉजी, इंजीनियरिंग और मैथमेटिक्स। इस क्षेत्र में ये बहुत गर्व का विषय है कि हमारे देश में स्टेम के विषयों पर रुचि रखने में बेटियों की संख्या लगातार बढ़ रही है। आज जब हम फ्यूचरिस्टिक टेक्नोलॉजीज के लिए तैयार हो रहे हैं, तो बहुत जरूरी है कि कोई भी बेटी अवसरों के अभाव में रुक न जाए। वेबिनार में आप इस दिशा में जरूर चर्चा करें। हमें महिलाओं के पार्टिसिपेशन को बढ़ाने पर और जोर देना होगा। हमें ऐसा रिसर्च इकोसिस्टम तैयार करना होगा जहां यंग रिसर्चर्स को एक्सपेरिमेंट करने और नए आइडियाज पर काम करने का पूरा अवसर मिले। साथियों, युवा शक्ति तभी राष्ट्रीय शक्ति बनती है जब वह स्वस्थ भी हो, अनुशासित भी हो और आत्मविश्वास से भरी हो। इसलिए पिछले कुछ वर्षों में खेलों को राष्ट्रीय विकास की एक महत्वपूर्ण धारा के रूप में देखा गया है। खेलो इंडिया जैसी पहलों ने देश में स्पोर्ट्स इकोसिस्टम को नई ऊर्जा दी है। देश भर में स्पोर्ट्स इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को मजबूत किया जा रहा है। इस वेबिनार में आप सभी कुछ सवालों पर जरूर मंथन करें, जैसे छोटी छोटी जगहों से भी प्रतिभाओं की पहचान को और सटीक कैसे किया जाए, हजारों खिलाड़ियों को स्ट्रक्चर्ड फाइनेंशियल सपोर्ट में सुधार कैसे हो, और तीसरी अहम बात, हमारी स्पोर्ट्स बॉडीज को और ज्यादा प्रोफेशनल कैसे बनाया जाए। अगले कुछ वर्षों में देश में कॉमनवेल्थ गेम्स होने जा रहे हैं। देश ओलंपिक आयोजन के प्रयास में जुटा है। ऐसे में हमें आज कम आयु के खिलाड़ियों को पहचान कर उन्हें तराशना होगा। तभी अंतर्राष्ट्रीय प्रतियोगिताओं में भारत का परचम लहरा पाएगा। साथियों, टूरिज्म और कल्चर रोजगार के नए अवसर बढ़ाने में बड़ी भूमिका निभाते हैं। जब किसी स्थान पर टूरिज्म बढ़ता है तो उस स्थान या उस शहर की ब्रांडिंग भी बढ़ जाती है। इससे उस शहर का ओवरऑल डेवलपमेंट भी बहुत तेज हो जाता है। भारत में ऐसे ऐतिहासिक स्थलों की कोई कमी नहीं है, लेकिन लंबे समय तक टूरिज्म कुछ चुनिंदा स्थानों तक ही सीमित रह गया। अब हमें देश के कोने कोने में टूरिस्ट डेस्टिनेशन को नए सिरे से डेवलप करने पर फोकस कर रहे हैं। साथियों, आप सभी इस वेबिनार में भारत के टूरिज्म इकोसिस्टम को मजबूत करने के लिए होलिस्टिक अप्रोच पर जरूर चर्चा करें। ट्रेन गाइड्स, हॉस्पिटैलिटी स्किल्स, डिजिटल कनेक्टिविटी, कम्युनिटी पार्टिसिपेशन, स्वच्छता, टूरिज्म और इनसे जुड़े विषयों पर आपके सुझाव बहुत अहम होंगे। साथियों, जब इंस्टीट्यूशंस, इंडस्ट्री, एकेडेमिया मिलकर काम करते हैं तो परिवर्तन की गति तेज हो जाती है। बजट के बाद वेबिनार की जो ये सीरीज हुई है, मुझे विश्वास है उससे आने वाले समय के लिए ठोस दिशा मिलेगी। ऐसे ही प्रयासों से विकसित भारत की नींव और मजबूत होगी। और साथियों, ये बड़ा सुखद अनुभव है कि वेबिनार की परंपरा के कारण पोस्ट बजट और खास करके इम्प्लीमेंटेशन कर मुझे जो बताया गया कि इस वर्ष लाखों की तादाद में लोग जो इन विषयों से जुड़े हुए हैं, एक्सपर्ट भी हैं, उसके लाभार्थी भी हैं, उसकी व्यवस्था से जुड़े हुए हैं, यानी एक प्रकार से जो जो लोग ड्राइविंग फोर्स हैं, वे सभी लोग बड़ी सक्रियता के साथ वेबिनार में जुड़े। हमारे अफसर मुझे बता रहे थे कि बहुत उत्तम सुझाव आ रहे हैं, बहुत प्रैक्टिकल सुझाव आ रहे हैं। यानी एक प्रकार से समस्याओं का समाधान ही नहीं, नई ऊर्जा, नई गति के साथ आगे बढ़ने का हौसला भी देखने को मिलता है। मैं कहता हूं कि ये वेबिनार का बहुत ही सुखद अनुभव है। इसमें हिस्सा लेने वाले सभी वेबिनार में जिन जिन लोगों ने हिस्सा लिया है, सब अभिनंदन के अधिकारी हैं, धन्यवाद के पात्र हैं। एक बार फिर आप सभी को बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। नमस्कार।
माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी, आपके प्रेरणादायक संबोधन के लिए धन्यवाद। Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we are now in the breakout sessions of the program led by different ministries. I invite Dr. Vineet Joshi, Secretary, Department of Higher Education, to present the outline of the sessions led by Ministry of Education.
Is I audible? Just be with Sanjay.
Sanjeev, can you hear us?
It should not be that. He's my
Sanjeev.
moderator.
Are you able to hear us? चौधरी साहब सुन पा रहे हैं आप हमें?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so actually we were waiting for Secretary Tourism to give his opening remarks, but I think he has handed over to us, and it's a separate breakout session for the initiatives that have to be steered by Ministry of Culture. So I would like to welcome everybody, all the participants for this breakout session. We have two sessions. One is on creating the National Destination Digital Knowledge Grid. That will be the first discussion and the presentation. And the second is the building of infrastructure and opening up of sites for having good visitor experience and doing investments. The scheme is called the DESH. So we will start with the National Destination Digital Knowledge Grid. I'll request Lily to start the presentation. And once the presentation is over, we will open the house for discussions. Lily, you can carry on.
Thank you, sir. Good morning to all participants joining this post-budget webinar under the theme Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, fulfilling the aspirations of the people. The Union Budget 2026 announced the establishment of the National Destination Digital Knowledge Grid, which will digitally document places of cultural, spiritual, and heritage significance across India. The idea is to create a unified digital ecosystem that documents, maps, and showcases India's diverse tourism assets in a structured and accessible format, leveraging cutting-edge and emerging technologies, notably AI, to enable conversational interfaces, intelligent itinerary generation, and discovery of lesser-known destinations, supporting livelihoods and creating new employment opportunities for local researchers, historians, storytellers, guides, and content creators.
You speak next.
India's cultural landscape is extraordinarily rich and diverse. However,
Next.
information related to these destinations often remains fragmented and inaccessible across different institutions and platforms. At the same time, there are some robust examples, such as the Mera Gaon Meri Dharohar portal under the National Mission of Cultural Mapping, a Ministry of Culture initiative. Under this scheme, we have documented our tangible and intangible cultural assets across more than 6 lakh villages in the country. The MGMD portal provides village-level cultural profiles, video documentation, research articles, and documentation of traditions, crafts, festivals, and personalities. There are other repositories such as museum collections, cultural archives, festival databases, artist information, and heritage documentation platforms. Together, these have led to significant cultural data sets that can be integrated to create an interoperable platform and a holistic knowledge ecosystem. Building on such efforts, the National Destination Digital Knowledge Grid is envisioned as a next-generation digital public infrastructure, transforming cultural documentation to accessible experiences and economic value. Now, the vision of this initiative is to establish a unified digital knowledge ecosystem that documents, connects, and showcases India's cultural destinations, enabling inclusive growth, tourism readiness, employment generation, and revitalization of local cultural economies. Next. The grid will pursue several key objectives. It will enable comprehensive digital documentation of cultural and heritage sites, strengthen India's digital tourism presence, and support intelligent discovery through technology. It will also create standardized destination profiles, integrate narratives and visitor experiences, and open new livelihood opportunities for local communities. Under this initiative, the destinations will be mapped through structured destination profiles, bringing together history, cultural narratives, visitor experiences, tourism amenities, craft clusters, and mobility information in one integrated framework. Next, the implementation approach will focus on integrating datasets from multiple existing platforms and scaling the infrastructure nationally through phased implementation and pilot initiatives. The initiative will also encourage collaboration with cultural institutions, research bodies, and creative economy partners to enrich the ecosystem. Technology will play an important role in enhancing user engagement with the platform. Artificial intelligence can enable conversational interfaces, personalized travel itineraries, and intelligent discovery of lesser-known destinations, making cultural knowledge more accessible and engaging. The expected outcomes. Can we move, please? Next. Tourism is doing it. Okay. Next, please.
Okay, carry on.
Okay. The expected outcomes include the creation of India's first unified digital knowledge grid for destinations, improved access to cultural information, and stronger evidence-based planning for tourism and cultural policy. Next, please. Next, please. Next. Now, importantly, this initiative would build upon the experience of cultural mapping programs, such as the Mera Gaon Meri Dharohar, which provides a strong foundation of grassroots cultural data. The Mera Gaon Meri Dharohar initiative, implemented under the National Mission on Cultural Mapping, has already documented cultural information across more than 6 lakh villages and created an interactive portal for accessing this information. The portal today hosts extensive village profiles, video documentation, and research articles highlighting the cultural uniqueness of villages across India. Recently, a nationwide Gram Sabha-based data validation exercise was undertaken on the Republic Day in collaboration with the Ministry of Panchayati Raj, demonstrating large-scale community participation in cultural documentation. The response to this initiative showed unprecedented participation across the country, reinforcing the effectiveness of community-driven approaches to documenting and preserving cultural heritage. A structured validation cycle has also been introduced to ensure reliability and quality of collected data before it is integrated into the national repository. If there is a problem with the slides, we can keep moving actually.
Next.
Acha, I have to keep telling them? Okay, please. Please move on. Next. Yeah, next. Next. A structured validation cycle has also been introduced to ensure reliability and quality of the collected data before it is integrated into the national repository. Next. Through this approach, traditional cultural documentation is being combined with modern digital systems such as real-time dashboards, multilingual platforms, and data validation workflows. Next. The experience from this initiative demonstrates that grassroots democratic institutions can play a vital role in creating a continuously updated and community-validated cultural knowledge repository. As we move from the national forward with the national destination digital knowledge grid, such data sets with participatory approaches can provide valuable foundations for building a comprehensive national knowledge infrastructure. Next. Against this backdrop, today's discussion will focus on important questions related to data integration, governance frameworks, technology architecture, and community participation in developing the national destination knowledge grid. We also look forward to exploring how the platform can integrate diverse cultural data sets and expand beyond rural documentation to cover the full spectrum of India's cultural and heritage landscape. Next. Now, spotlighting these issues, today's session brings together a very distinguished panel of experts from fields of culture, technology, heritage, and storytelling to deliberate on how this knowledge grid can be conceptualized and implemented effectively. Our session will be moderated by Dr. Sanjoy Roy, who is the co-chair of FICCI's Creative and Cultural Committee. He is also the managing director of Teamworks Arts and a producer of over 30 festivals across the world, including the Jaipur Literature Festival. Mr. Roy is expected to guide the discussion on how India can move from cultural mapping to a dynamic knowledge infrastructure. We are also joined by Mr. Saurabh Mishra, who will speak about the role of artificial intelligence and digital technologies in building India's cultural intelligence stack. Ms. Ritu Sethi, who brings insights on documenting living traditions, crafts ecosystems, and community participation in cultural documentation. Mr. Ratnesh Mathur, who will discuss how museums and cultural institutions can be integrated into interoperable digital heritage systems. And Mr. Eric Chopra, who will reflect on the importance of storytelling and democratizing historical narratives through digital platforms. Together, this panel represents a rich convergence of technology, heritage expertise, community knowledge, and narrative frameworks, all of which are essential to build a credible and inclusive digital knowledge infrastructure. I would now invite Sanjoy Roy to take the panel discussion forward.
Thank you, Joint Secretary, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's absolutely vital that this conversation happen. We'd like to thank the Prime Minister for his address and, of course, the Finance Minister for adding into the budget the key components of what she referred to as the orange economy. This is an area I think all of us have been involved in as to how the creative sector can and does create jobs, it upskills, it creates opportunities at so many different levels. And I think one of the vital aspects that we need to look at is really the cross-section of knowledge, creativity, culture, tradition, heritage, and technology. How did this come together and how does this work? Could you perhaps remove the presentation slide so that we can see each other? Thank you so much for introducing our panelists. And I'm going to start with Ritu Sethi. Ritu Sethi, as many of you will know, has been working in the area of craft. And Ritu, one of the things that you've been championing for a while is really looking at mapping of the craft sector. And we know that during COVID, one of the things that happened is even as markets got destroyed, the traditional market system got destroyed because nobody could get their products to market. It became vital for the craft sector to have access to technology, to be able to load their products. But it also became equally important in terms of what the Ministry of Culture had been doing, which was mapping the craft sector and the heritage sector across the length and breadth of the country. Without data, we know that it's so difficult to drive any kind of policy. And it's really data that's vital today. Who are the craftspeople? What's the sector? I mean, one of the things that we've always said is that about 400 million people involved in the agrarian economy have been part of the craft sector because between sowing and harvesting, everybody or most families are involved in some process within the larger craft and performing arts sector, whether it's the langas and manganiyars in Rajasthan or the puppeteers in Andhra, or of course the entire length and breadth of the weaving community. So tell us a little bit about Ritu as to why this is so vital to map the sector and some of the work that you folks have been doing.
Thank you, Sanjoy. You know, this is the area that I have been really advocating about because we are so fortunate that we live in a country where we have some of the lowest data costs in the world. In effect, even a smartphone costs 5,000 rupees and is accessible. This is our amazing, this national grid will really link and build on this soft power that India has. Yes, we don't have the numbers, but we will populate it because this will be a community participatory project. And we know that therefore its roots will go down and its unintended consequences, I am sure, will lead to its being inclusion in the satellite account on culture, on the fact that when the vibrancy of the reaction will be seen, because everything now is youth-led. And when I go into any living heritage cluster, I see how critical this is. And you mentioned COVID. COVID opened up a whole new world. Now, for me, the importance of this remarkable cultural national grid is that A, it includes living heritage. And by including living heritage, it really links to the grassroots because we know our heritage lives across. There's a democracy of creative expression that is living across. And by giving this access, we are going to see a huge resurgence, and we are also going to see a participation where people are able to speak about their own practice. So that is one of the things I wanted to mention. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that what we're seeing specific to craft performances is people reaching out themselves. They don't need an intermediary anymore. And by being mapped on this cultural grid, it gives them access, it gives them visibility. And by also being included in this tourism framework, we will find that these areas too will become destinations where people want to go and see a weave, a craft, a performance at a local level. So I'm actually very excited about it. But I want to add one more thing before you move on. And that is that there so much exists already. And we all approach it from our own specialist point of view, anthropologists, historians, civil society. This, I hope, becomes a PPP, and this layering happens. So we see not only the width, but also the depth.
Thank you, Ritu. And when I come back to you, because one of the things that I hope this webinar is going to throw up is what are the good practices and what are the gaps that need to be filled through policy. Given that there's so much of effort now that the Ministry of Culture and the Secretary, people like Joint Secretary Lily Pandey are doing, we really need to get a white paper to focus on how do we cover the gaps, because we know there are gaps, and how do we make this far more vibrant and dynamic? So give that a thought, and I'll come back to you. Ratnesh, you've been doing a lot of mapping, and one of the more exciting projects you've been involved in is really looking beyond the idea of English. You've been looking at the language models. You've realized the absolute vitality for how language models work, especially for India. Can you give us a sense of how you've done this? And I know that you've started mapping now in Marathi as well as Malayalam. So give us a sense and the scope of the work that you've been doing.
Thank you very much. So Prarang, we started about 9 years back. Our primary focus was around, solving the digital divide problem. So we said the non-English speakers, because we are 80% of India is literate, but only 11% of India knows English at some level. Yeah, 6% is entirely fluent, but the balance 5% is not really fluent. So, and yet we have such a high literacy rate. And then the mobile phone started spreading. That's how we focused on this aspect. But the first thing we did was we started measurement. So what we've done is a measurement of all 800 districts of India. And in fact, now we've extended it globally. So 196 countries that we have. Now, if you look at that, the official languages in the world are only 178, of which 22 form India's official languages, which are in our constitution. So if we focus on that, it still looks like a very big piece. But the underlying connectivity in India is actually the scripts are few. We are largely Varnmala scripts country. So when we look at text and we have to communicate, the scope reduces. Yeah. So we've actually got a huge inventory of books and pictures, and we've used this to create very large databases on India. So at any point for 800 districts, we have around 440 fields of data, which we are keeping updated. And for 196 countries, we have about 300 fields of data, which we keep updated. So it is socioeconomic, but there's a lot of cultural and nature data also, which we've quantified. Now, on top of it, we've written a small language model, which is working today, as you rightly said. It's in English, in Hindi, in Marathi, and very shortly in Malayalam. Basically, it's designed in such a way that one translator works for about a month, and a new script entirely of our entire website we are able to produce. So we've got to that point where we are able to provide a multilingual frameworks, and that model is quite large. So it's a data-centric approach with a small language model that we have made on our own. Of course, for research, these new generative AI tools are helping us to get the pre-digitized information. But in reality, what we are trying to fill is that type of content which is not there on the internet. Yeah, and therefore the connection with books is very powerful, because a lot of Indian information is not there on the internet. The total content in Indian languages or Indian scripts is less than 1% of the content on the World Wide Web. So whether it's Tamil or it's Hindi, we have less than 0.1% of the web. 60% of the internet is in English. And out of the 178 languages, 30 languages, including Turkish, they have a disproportionate volume, or Czech language. So the developed countries have a lot of content, and Indian language content is missing. This is how we started our project. And what we are trying to do is, with our model, is make massive databases and small language models. And therefore, we are able to create very fast, very high volume of web content. Underlying all of this is images. So we have an obsession with copyright-free images, which again, the dependency on antique books, antique pictures in the books, and otherwise print. So print has been the other piece that we are focused on. We have a physical inventory of 30,000 books, a lot of them copyright-free, 6 lakh images, which are rare prints of India. And so this is how we are doing, the balancing. Our knowledge is still coming from the print. And therefore, we are very focused on creating that content which is not digitized yet.
Ratnesh, we're in such a fascinating space right now, because even as we drive towards the knowledge economy, which is, the big sector that India is looking at outside of the manufacturing economy, how do you see, and we have so many people from the corporate world right now on this webinar as well, how do you see the interface between work that people like you are doing in the private sector, the work that corporates are doing, and of course, how do we interface that with government to make these far more collaborative?
Thank you. Actually, we're at a very pivotal point. Sorry, because of the artificial intelligence and how it operates. We're at a pivotal point where we must create, private-public partnerships for machine learning. Let's take the case of a simple thing. We say history and culture. But underlying this, right now, there are two aspects. You can see the divide. On one front, we have a very active community of a Facebook page for trees of India, for butterflies of India, where and birds, of course, it's very large, where people are going with their cameras and capturing, hey, I spotted this butterfly, or I spotted this species of a bird near my place, and the location gets marked. Now, this is sitting on Facebook. On the other hand, we have databases, right? So we do have databases on plants of India, on even say butterflies. Butterflies, we have around 3,000 documented species in India, and if you compare that to UK, we have barely 50, right? So 50 versus 3,000. Now 3,000 need to be connected with the districts, because that's the way India's operating model on metrics works. So this is where I think we do need to bring this, what's lying on the Facebook in private spaces, to be connected with the ministry or the department in the government which has the inventory. So we are sitting with dormant inventories because we skipped the yellow pages phase entirely in this country. So time is now In some ways, it protects us from the advent of these the theft which these the the screen scraping which is happening in the world. But that screen scraping is largely happening on the stuff which is already digitized. So it steals from blogs, people who made websites, it steals from it. But most of Indian depth of even databases on, say, butterflies or trees is lying in books. And these are also lying with various government departments which have historically kept inventories, right? So between these, let's call it a machine learning initiative, which, for instance, we must have a machine learning initiative on numismatics, on epigraphy, and of course, archaeological sites. The ASI database is very strong. Then we have master craftsmen, which Ritu just mentioned. So the master craftsmen beautifully mapped by various locations, also partly because of the geotagging initiative which happened in crafts. So now it's time to bring this and not wait for some prompt which is actually waiting for this digitization to happen. We need to have a data-centric approach, and we need to have our own Indian machine learning systems to protect, because we know more than what the machine does. Most of what is coming inside the generative AI right now is antique books. So the books are colonial period. They've been digitized, they're out of copyright, and they are now finding their way through the search engine, through the prompts, because the search engines couldn't pick them up, right? So a lot of antique information is coming. It's antiquated. It is often very wrong. So the guardrails for this new web and the knowledge web is always going to be the government's district data. And I'll give you one piece on which our company is resting, which people are not using. And that is that India's far ahead. In 2011 census, 1.2 billion people were asked, what's your mother tongue? Do you know a second language or a third language? This happened for the first time. It had never ever happened before. In 2018, this data was released. So today, there is a dormant data which needs to be used. And that is for 7,900 cities of India, not just 800 districts. And all, we have actually this granular data that that out of the 1.2 billion, say in a village called, say, in Hapur district, how many people know Malayalam as level 2 or level 3? And it is not just Malayalam. 120 languages data points are lying for 7,900 cities. That is very, very powerful, because historically, all we had for towns or villages was just the population breakup. Everything else is actually, even growth rates, everything else is at a district level. So you're actually interpolating. But here, we have the language. Now, language is related to culture, right? So if you know, and that is what it took us a few years to use that. But we today actually, if you're going to village X or location Y, you know how many English speakers there are. And it's at a click that's available on a website. So I think underlying this, we need to expand on the machine learning initiatives, and we need to start making these databases of Indian butterflies. We need to connect the Facebook groups, as I see it, social media groups, to we have very large, very interesting communities happening, for trees of India, and there is global interest in the subject. So let's say there is a baobab tree which is on the outskirts of Allahabad, and that's Hyun Sang describes when he comes to India. He describes that tree. The tree is still there. It's a baobab tree. It's called a ulta pulta tree. But does the local village which is staying around it, the villagers, do they know who Hyun Sang was, for instance? But so we have history, documented history of a tree. Now that's an asset. We need to advertise it. It's there. So what is happening today is that there are two bloggers, people who have done a PhD on that subject, who came visiting and have written about it. So, do we need to wait for the search engine or the prompt to throw this at us? Or do we need to make such intangible assets now our power, our power solutions? That's, I think, where the opportunity lies. So I'm excited about this phase, because I think there is awareness, and then I think we are sitting with assets which the rest of the world doesn't have.
So Saurabh, Ratnesh talks about the sitting on assets that the rest of the world doesn't have. He's also talking about all of the dormant information and knowledge, and the fact that government has all of this knowledge. You yourself have been building AI platforms that help government organize and analyze large knowledge systems. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing, and how can you, in this analyzing of large data that government sits on and the systems that you build help the rest of this particular sector, especially craft, knowledge, literature, history, architecture? How can that be leveraged through what you've been building?
Sanjoy, it's a very good question, and much
I'm sorry, just to put this in context, Saurabh is joining us from Philadelphia. I think it's 2 a.m. in the morning.
That's
So
right.
Saurabh, I think on behalf of all of us, a big thank you for making this effort of waking up in your hotel room, wherever you are.
Well,
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I'm a little bit sick, so my voice might be a little off, so forgive me for that. But I mean, rightly, as other panelists and the Joint Secretary mentioned as well, you see, the cost of AI is going down exponentially, right? So whether it be inference costs or training AI systems, it's going down so fast. What really makes a difference, right, is the unique data that your organization has access to. What This is a side note, what I have developed with my own firm is basically scraping and building data from more than 40,000 official government sources about urban infrastructure, pulse of public procurement, the multi-hazard environment around major projects. And that makes a true difference. It's not just the data alone, but standardizing data, enriching data, and then building levels of stacks of intelligence on top of that. So in our context, what we're talking about here is that civilizations are ultimately built on knowledge systems as well. Much of this heritage, right, does not only sit in monuments and museums, as everyone's highlighting. It sits in villages, in festivals, in artisan workshops. Culture is not simply just history, right? It is the living pulse of society. And what I'm very interested here by, right, is how does culture, we can codify it, measure it, but how does that lead to creating economic opportunity for the districts in India? I think that is a central question, right? Because globally, this is increasingly, this creative economy is perhaps one of the fast growing sectors, right? But and India's cultural and creative economy is very diverse, from what the Prime Minister mentioned, from yoga, cuisine, textile, healthcare, telemedicine, literature, and so on and so forth. So I mean, kudos to the Joint Secretary and the team for the MGMD initiative, because it's one of the first large-scale efforts to document cultural assets at a village level across India, right? And this is not simply a database, but a foundation for national cultural knowledge systems. What did we do? Which I don't know if I can show it to you today. We combined the MGMD data with all the projects that are happening in roads, railway, energy systems, the engine of economic growth in India, to better sort of start now prompting, right, asking questions for planners, policymakers, to help inform how this can further be propelled going forward. So the cultural knowledge, as this becomes more digitized through initiatives like MGMD, it becomes powerful because it becomes institutional memory, right? But institutional memory then becomes a foundation for what I might call cognitive infrastructure, right? This is like the systems through which society organizes knowledge, expertise, and cultural memory over time. So, where I feel AI can help play a role is this. It's again not just the mix and match of data to build intelligence, but one to help governments plan more intelligently, context aware of what is the related environment, infrastructure where these cultural happenings are happening. Second, I think how we could imagine just to see the pulse of which of these artisans, products, intangibles, right, might be trending. How do we create opportunity for them to have broader market access within India, South Asia, and broader export markets, right? Using the data and intelligence to essentially create economic opportunity, which is really, it's not a monolithic story of India as a whole. It is unique to each and single every district based on their expertise and how those expertise relate to specific subtypes of technologies. So again, I think my punchline here is more, how do we leverage data, AI, and technologies to help create economic opportunities that are unique to each district and each village?
So sort of one of the most interesting things is that, as you said, or as everybody has said on this, it's really the districts which can propel economic growth in India outside of the big cities, etc. And to be able to do that, if you look at the larger cultural tourism and heritage and architectural sector, you can see that in cleaning up villages, in ensuring that you have all of the infrastructure, connectivity, clean loos, facilities where you host people, you can actually create that kind of value-driven activity that's much needed there for the local craftsperson, for the local guide, for the architectural heritage there. But you've been talking about predictive tourism, intelligence, using this data. Talk us a little bit through this in terms of how does that overlay, once you get this data, how can you then convert this into tourism potential stuff? I remember just 3 days ago, somebody messaged me saying, I want to go to Kagazipura because I've been talking about Kagazipura, which is this village near Aurangabad, 14 kilometers from Aurangabad, which was one of the first villages that looked at how do you create paper. And it's also the village that created the paper on which Akbar signed some of his deeds and documents, etc. Their question to me was so interesting because they said, so Sanjoy, when we go to Kagazipura, where do we stay? And one of our colleagues has a weak bladder. Is there a loo? And I was like, oh, well, I'm not quite sure, but let me check. And I know you can go to Aurangabad. But tell us, how can this overlap happen in a way that helps both government as well as private players, as well as at the district level?
It's a deep question, Sanjoy. And maybe let me rephrase the question to think about it from one or two perspectives here, right? One is, I think, something, a paper he had recently released where, and I don't exactly remember the stats, but it was something to the degree that I think it's 13 districts in India that make up 50% of India's GDP at a macro level. So India's challenge is not growth. India's challenge is the geography of growth. So I think a big part of what these intangible assets, inherent expertise that sits inside these districts and villages, how do we make them exportable and high value? Something I feel like countries like France and others have in some degree mastered through the right policy levers. Second, I think this point that India has its own growth trajectory, unlike China or let's say US or Europe. Similarly, every district in India has its own growth trajectory to create jobs and growth, right? So, case in point, I don't know if you're doing textiles and manufacturing, right? Then there's maybe aspects of computer vision as a subtype of AI, right? Which can help you increase quality in terms of how you are building textiles. If you're doing a certain form of art form in music, or things of that nature, right? Or paintings, there'll be a different subtype of AI. It's not only language models. So I think we need to go to the granular details to help digitize, right, the local district's core capabilities, right, into what helps them increase their value. And that awareness of which kind of technology helps increase value in what these districts do gives you visibility to how they can diversify into higher value added things in the next 2 to 5 years to create jobs and growth. So, how do we envision all of this from an AI and a policy perspective, is your question? Then I think it's, again, treating cultural data sets as a national digital infrastructure. And I think that's a path that has already started with initiatives the Joint Secretary talked about. And I think this becomes the oil and the raw material, but that alone is not going to cut it, right? Because it's about the mixture of combining data sets. What I had just done with the MGMT data, combine it with tens of thousands of projects and risk data to start really inquiring and asking deeper questions about what should be the districts in Jammu and Kashmir versus Bihar. Like, how do they actually support tourism infrastructure? How do they propel creative industries? Because the answer for all of them is going to be unique, and you need to mix and match data sets to start seeing a little bit of this. Second, I think is this point which has been raised on regional creative economic clusters, right? So I think this, with better data and better coordinated policy, I think helping each of these individual specializations in the districts will have their own growth trajectory. And third, I would say it would be aspects of stronger institutional coordination as you have access to better intangibles, cultural data. Think about a unified knowledge interface to make it easier for researchers, policymakers, tourism planners, urban planners, entrepreneurs, right? To coordinate better, streamline how we are looking at the world today, but also bringing visibility to which of these districts in which specialization are most uniquely standing out today. What is their future economic opportunity?
Absolutely. And good practices. Can we share good practices? Can they be highlighted from this data? Because as you said, rubbish in, rubbish out. So how do you analyze it and how do you get them to share it at a different level? I'll come back to you on that. We have with us Eric Chopra, who's actually walking the talk, so to speak. And Eric represents a whole new generation, and he's in many ways the future of India in this sector. So very quickly, Eric, two questions to you. One is, at a fairly young age comparatively, you decided to get into history and you set up Itihasology with your colleagues. And you've now translated that in terms of not just a portal for knowledge or verified knowledge, but you also take people on walking tours to be able to examine some of what you have on your portal. So tell us, what brought you to history immediately out of school or while you were in school in your more recent times? And of course, how have you used knowledge and data and AI and technology to be able to highlight this?
Thank you so much, Seanjoy, and thank you to the ministry for organizing this. It's an absolute honor to be here. For the first question, it is as much a mystery to me till today, because we globally grow up in a world where it seems impossible to say that when I grow up, I want to be a historian, I want to be a curator, I want to be an archaeologist. Those are things for Indiana Jones and exotic movies. But it did happen that at the very end of my school life, I realized that to pave a way for the future, you need to look at the past. For even India, when it was framing its constitution, the idea was to look at the past, look at the way in which geographies across the world have framed their vision forward. And it was only by looking at your diversity, your inclusive nature of being, and of course, your antiquity that you could move ahead, which was the start of Itihasology, Seanjoy, which continues to be a public history platform that wants to showcase that Indian history and art as well are not static entities. They move forward with time, with us, with our interpretation. And people are an essential part of it. I think one of the reasons why we are not able to see ourselves as a part of history is because we are never told to engage with it, imagining ourselves in the canvas. And that is something that Itihasology wants to break. And what we've been attempting to do is bringing people into the ambit of history through our excursions, which, as you said, one of them is the segment of heritage trails and walks that we do. Now, one of the things that I realized as this panel moved on is that everyone said that India is a treasure trove of tangible and intangible histories in every geography. But historically, this has been us. We've been a curious people, not only us, but travelers who have left behind memoirs, travel diaries, extensive documentation across the length and breadth of India and its diversity. But where I believe our work starts and what Itihasology has always focused on is what to do with this. What do you do with a past that is so rich and intense? Remembrance is one part, but how do we make it a part of our lives in practical and sustainable ways? In a way, asking the question, is there a future with the past? Now, working on social media, one realizes that there is a huge appetite. You can tell history through stories and people engage with it instantly. A stepwell or a tomb that few people noticed yesterday can suddenly spark thousands of conversations once its story is shared. But you do need sources to share these stories. For years, I have used the digital portal of the Government of India, Museums of India, that has made paintings and visual objects and various artworks and sculptures accessible so that they can be used and these stories can be told. But one problem that we are facing currently, Shanjoy, and I believe that this is a problem that concerns all of us, because while a repository and portals like ours exist, the question that the youth is asking is how can they be a part of this? Because in many ways, they still find it impossible to be able to work in this industry. And I think the grid could evolve into a national entry point for young people who wish to work in history, heritage, and cultural research, but clearly see no clear pathway. So, across universities in India, there is a large and curious cohort of students interested in becoming an archaeologist, an art historian, an archivist, a museum professional. Yet they lack the visibility into how these careers can function or where opportunities exist. So the grid could address by embedding perhaps a youth participation and knowledge creation there. I also believe that the grid highlights professions that underpin heritage knowledge but remain largely invisible to students. For example, to put out anything, even a small museum object, you need archival preservation, scientific research, environmental history. Ratnesh was talking about how there is massive interest in the trees of India or the butterflies of India. That exists, but what do you do with this interest? The other thing, Shanjoy, that heritage trails have revealed to us, and I believe this was a point that was raised in the beginning. If you look at the annual report of the Ministry of Tourism, you would notice that there's a trend of certain monuments and certain geographies being the most visited. So, of course, apart from the fact that the grid could help redistribute interest and footfall, I believe what's important is clusters. And we just spoke about it from an accessibility point of view. So, from an accessibility point of view, I believe I've just come back from Bhangarh and Ajabgarh. And for many years, Bhangarh, because of its oral history and its haunted reputation, has seen around the area a lack of people's dwellings. People were not moving to stay near the areas. But now, as tourism is
Eric, just
increasing,
set into context where Bhangarh is. I don't think
yes.
everybody will know that it
So,
was this haunted.
Bhangarh is this fortress that is in Alwar in Rajasthan. It is surrounded by the Aravallis, billions of years old, and it is supposedly a monument that in oral legends is haunted. Now, because of this story, there has been a lack of people living near the area, which has been changing. So most people live in Ajabgarh, which is a few kilometers away. But as I spoke to curators and tour guides over there, the local community, they said there is such great interest in people to come here. But apart from the fact that there is this reputation of being haunted, the other problem is wheelchair access. The other problem is bathrooms. We have people seated over there who provide you water, but that is community effort. Now, there is a community that already exists and it's doing this. How do I think that the grid can help in this? I feel like you need to look at history in clusters. So there is heritage density across regions. So one is the heritage cluster. For example, if we're talking about Alwar and Rajasthan, you look at Bhangarh and you notice layers of time, natural and deep time through the Aravallis and the wildlife, prehistoric time through Stone Age, and then prominently the medieval period. That's one heritage cluster that the grid can highlight. Apart from that, accessibility. What is nearby? How do you go to the nearest restroom? How do you go to the nearest bazaar? All of that, if it becomes a part of one heritage cluster, instead of just looking at the monument, I believe it could generate great interest. And a good example would be, with accessibility and clusters of history is the Red Fort in Delhi, where now you see maintenance being a very important part of the museum culture as well, and accessibility being as important as the stories that we tell when we take people inside. So I think in these ways, we could really, really utilize this grid.
Thanks, Eric. Eric, just to put you onto the spot, and apologies for being ageist, but can you tell us at what age did you start or get involved with Itihasology?
I started Ethnology right out of school, so I was 17, and I met you when I was 18, and now I'm 24.
Thanks. I just wanted to put that into context because, we need young people to get into this kind of sector, and we need to make it sexy and attractive. Eric sort of thought history was going to be part of it. He's written his first book at the age of 23, 22.
20. I mean, I started 22, but it just came out
Yeah,
now.
just come out. So, this is amazing. Thanks so much, Eric. Ritu, coming back to you, Eric talked about clusters, and we know that one of the main issues that we are confronting, if everybody remembers, there was a time where China dumped a lot of silks into India, killed some of the Banarasi textile traditions. So, Ritu, in all of this, making everything accessible on the World Wide Web or through our systems or through our mapping systems, why is it so important today that we absolutely focus on GI tagging and ensure that our living heritage craft traditions are not just mapped and supported, but are actually protected?
Thank you for that, Sanjoy. But I want to step back a bit and say I must congratulate the Ministry of Culture on MGMD because it is actually a takeoff point. In India, we now have a total of about, I think, a little more than 650 GI tags. But as you're aware, it includes agriculture and other products. But the fabulous thing is that a bit over 60% is in the living traditions of arts and crafts. I think this MGMD is actually going to help increase GI tagging. If we are able, as I said in the beginning, that the importance of this grid is to layer anthropology with business, with toilet mapping, with whatever everyone else has spoken to, but it forms the base of where to go to GI tag, because GI tag is based on location, and its next aspect is marketing and branding. So yes, it's critical, but I want to add one more thing. Everything has its issues. The first stage is GI tagging, and it only came into India in, I think, 1999 when the act was passed. But till now, the second aspect of it, of building the part B, which is of certification, it's happened for agricultural products, but only for a few of the arts and crafts. One is Aranamulla mirror, and the other is of the Kashmir cashmere. This needs to be encouraged too and pushed, but that's a discussion for another day. But the fact that awareness is spreading is a very big deal. But I want to come back to something you had mentioned in the beginning. You said, where are the gaps? We keep talking about gaps for only one reason, and that is because we don't know. There are people filling in gaps everywhere. And as one of the panelists spoke about butterflies, there are small museums of knowledge. In Jharkhand, there's a small museum, a living museum, where you can go and see Sarai art in progress. You can learn its history. Very few people know about it. And this is what I hope for this, that these small, relatively unknown, which are known only to those who work within the sector, are spread. And that is why my recommendation for this digital architectural grid for culture is that it remain dynamic. That if today you say this place exists, if it doesn't exist tomorrow, it is removed, or a new place comes up, it remains dynamic. It doesn't stop. Kar diya, bas ho gaya. No. And that is where the training at the ground level, at the village level, is critical, where you are able to post, instead of posting on Facebook, you post here. Yes, there needs to be a layer that decides what to put it on the national grid, but this is India's Facebook of culture. Yeah, so I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Thanks,
But
Ritu. Yeah, thanks, Ritu. Ratnesh, Ritu talks about the museums of knowledge. You've been trying to have a museum, bought your own land in UP. You've got a large collections of maps and knowledge that you're trying to put together there. And yet there are all these stumbling blocks that don't allow you to set up this center, which can become a center of excellence and research. Similarly, I've been helping Shomjit, a collector and a musician from Calcutta. He's got 70 string instruments going back all the way 400 years. He's been trying to create some sort of system to be able to allow people to access that, to create some kind of museum. But he too is finding all of these stumbling blocks. They sit in his 4 or 5 apartments that he has in Calcutta. What are these stumbling blocks, and how can we use some of this technology that government is rolling out to be able to work in a collaborative way? What are those stumbling blocks? What do we need to do in terms of finding ways to be able to resolve the gaps?
I think various panelists have highlighted how the museums or creation of museums is facilitating this. So we have to take an approach to this, which is very similar to how the venture capitalists work. Yeah. So at this point, the government, I think, has about 43 museums. There is this great website, MGMD, which is trying to get to 6.5 lakh villages with digital inputs coming from the village. Now, let's take a case in point. One of the MGMD villages is something that I've been researching for almost 10, 12 years, and I go there every 2-3 months. It's called Ahi Chhatra. Now, should we know about Ahi Chhatra? Because it's about 3.5 hours drive to 4 hours drive from Delhi. Now, this was today, the name has not changed, but it was India's largest city from 800 BC to 600 AD. It is the Panchala's capital, and it's the second most mentioned city in the Mahabharata. Now, what we require right now, I mean, I go there, I find it very exciting. But if I take someone over there is actually, at the site, unless you know its antiquity, you actually have to travel to either Allahabad or National Museum in Delhi to see the artifacts. Similarly, Hastinapur, which is not far from here, Hastinapur is more famous than Ahi Chhatra, the Kaurava capital. It's a really small site archaeologically, and the few finds of it are lying in the government museum in Meerut. Okay, so it's small. On the other hand, Ahi Chhatra, which was a massive city with the Greeks settling there around 500 BC, is a huge, I would say the terracotta collection in National Museum, about 15 to 20% comes from Ahi Chhatra. Allahabad also, Cunningham put his collection over there. So now the point I'm making is that what we need, the need of the hour, is actually small site museums. You don't have to invest too much. And if you see, the infrastructure upgrade of clean toilets, etc., this from the private sector, I think there is already now in the last 5 years, the solution is there. But guess what? The private sector will only go and invest after a certain point in time when there is enough footfall. And when the startup kind of a culture, so I think small budget site museums, creation of local jobs as guides, and in these site museums, don't put artifacts. You just need to take printouts from the internet, create the history in from the digital, create a physical, create a small book, get the locals to be aware of it, and create then the youngster on that website will make his story. He will put his own picture, but he needs that association. So today, Ahi Chhatra's records are lying in museums. They're not even properly documented in a book. But from Panini's book to, it is one of the most mentioned cities of ancient India. So I mean, from the Vedas to the Mahabharata, it's just packed with information about that town, right? And so this is what we need to do. We need to create maybe with a spend of an upfront spend of say 25 lakhs, a room which you rent, and you basically create the story so let's call it a site museum. Then the infrastructure will come up around it. A clean toilet maybe can be created there, but we don't need to invest large, and we need to be ready to fail. I think the private sector doesn't wish to fail, right? So some of these sites are going to get a lot of footfall. Some of them are going to pass away. So I think the way this needs to start is to make a list of the 200 places mentioned in the Mahabharata then make the route maps around it, and maybe, keep the budget. So 25 of those top 20 sites. Similarly, on the Buddhist circuit, Ramayana, there's so many sites, right? So there's a Karn, so the villagers know there's a Karn Kuan. So Karna's Kuan. Now Karna's Kuan is nothing. I mean, if there is an archaeological site, and then you have to map it with the ASI records. Now this can be done centrally. What is required is for the locals to feel some bit of their history. Then, like the bloggers here in Delhi or in Bombay, this culture will itself come up. So I think the job creation is going to happen in local languages around a center which needs to be created. It needs to have a physical space. And that physical space, the digital, let's take the case in point of MGMD. We've got documentation which is not there on other sites. Let's pull this out, right? Take some of these sites, but let's have a list of sites where we make small site museums. We can't be happy with 45 government-run museums. It's just insufficient for the scale of what we have. And you don't need to make massive museums with artifacts. I think there's going to be a security issue, all of that. So we need to take the digital and create the print and the print story, the new way of narrating, right? It doesn't have to be very technology intensive, but it certainly has to be some connected with the web, right? So we need a space for the locals to talk in their own language and then recite around it. But look, somebody's got to put the guardrails. The guardrails have to be from defining a Mahabharata circuit on a clear website and pointing out. You mentioned Kagaspura. I mean, Kagaspura is 8 kilometers from Ellora Caves. It's got plenty of stuff. It is 500 meters from Aurangzeb's burial place, right? So the infrastructure already exists. This is stuff which will fall in place. To me, the infrastructure, I think, is you can rely on the private sector. The private sector will invest once the footfall is there. But it's the startup spirit.
Ratnesh, let me just bring in Saurabh at this point of time. Saurabh, Ratnesh talks about site museums and the fact that we don't necessarily need to have artifacts there. But of course, what we can have and what you've been looking at is AR, VR. And I'll give you an example. The Royal Academy of the Arts had put together the exhibition of the Chola bronzes, 24 of them, and we had to, stand. There were 3 blocks of around which lines were formed to be able to come and see this. Finally, when I came back to India, I went to Chennai to the museum to see the rest of it. And I get there, and of course, the museum was locked. I had to go to the main museum. Somebody came on a cycle, opened the lock. It was dusty. But what was missing for me was the fact that there was no document in terms of what each of these Chola bronzes in the museum represented, which you can do very easily when you're looking at AR and VR. And what Ratnesh is saying, can we have site museums which are far more dynamic? Tell us a little bit about how we can use this in terms of reconstruction, because that obviously is one way forward to be able to make each of these places dynamic, be it a Khajuraho, so that you can point out to the people that, hey, this frieze at the corner of this South Temple has a woman with what looks like a Gucci bag. It's something that people miss, and you're looking at 1,000 years ago. So the detailing can come through in AR, VR. Tell us a little bit about what you've done in that area.
Not my core expertise, but I would say it would be hard to decouple this intangible assets that we're talking about without the physical understanding of the world. Let me ask you a question, Sanjoy. When do you think in evolutionary biology terms did the advent of language emerge? Like how long ago would you say?
Well, right from the beginning, the first, and if you read Martin Buckner's book
Yeah.
on this, which I'm sure you've read, you'll see that the oral traditions came pretty much with the beginnings of man, right? So you're looking at 100,000, 150,000, etc. Language per se, of course, followed later in terms of defined language in the way that we define language.
Right. So, I mean, there's new research coming out, but it might be a couple 100,000, 500,000. I mean, if you give it or take, even 500,000 more. But when do you think the vision came about in evolutionary biology terms? Any guesses?
No guesses.
500 million years ago.
Wow.
So we are stuck in this world, to your AR VR point, right, where we're so obsessed with language, but our understanding of the physical reality is one of the limitations and next frontier in AI. So the way I think about the national grid isn't just a documentation effort, right? I think about this as a national cultural intelligence system, basically, right? And I think India has got a tremendous track record, right, to build digital public infrastructure systems, right, in identity, payments, governance, and more. Um, but the important point when I'm hearing all the panelists speak, I'm reminded that cultural destinations and all these things do not exist in isolation, right? A temple, a craft village, a heritage monument, all these things, the visitor experience, right? Of course, the experience of whether that lady is wearing a Gucci bag 1,000 years ago is important, but how, if it's a pain in the neck to get there, that's a bigger challenge, right? How easy is it to reach the destination? Is there reliable, safe transport connectivity? Is there safe accommodation? Are there public facilities? Are local artisans connected to the markets? Do they have a livelihood? Basically, the success of the cultural destination depends on the broader public infrastructure ecosystem surrounding the site, right? Which is the transport infrastructure, tourism, sanitation, hospitality. You need power, urban services, all of that. So while we focus on documenting the story of the place, I think Eric was sort of mentioning this earlier too. I feel, if not more important, right, the maintenance, accessibility, the infrastructure supporting that and sustaining that cultural ecosystem is more than half the story. And this is where I think data can play a role. And this is something we have already seen in our own work, right? When we analyze urban infrastructure systems globally using geocoding, all the spatial data, tens of thousands of sites from the Indian government on projects, procurement, climate, economy, which parts are going to have sea level rise or drought. Like these climate change is equally not an existentialist threat, but if you're planning for the next 10, 15 years for these sites, one of the reasons a lot of the sites and archaeological sites in India don't stand the test of time, unlike Europeans or others, is because of just heat, right? And I think accounting for this multi-hazard environment and the diversity and multitude of transport networks, cities, utilities, broader economic activity around these cities, right? I think it becomes a more wholesome story and more very important to consider. So I think the grid isn't just a record of heritage, but it's really a planning tool to help coordinate different levels of governments from central, state, local, and more to coordinate and to help them actually empower them to give them the intelligence that they need. So, anyways, what's going on through my mind through hearing all these conversations is that cultural heritage tells maybe the story of the place, right? And what happened there. But the public infrastructure surrounding that determines how the world will experience it.
Absolutely, Saurabh. I remember going to a place in Peru, or I can't remember whether it was Peru or Argentina, where there was literally a pile of bricks and there was a whole, museum center around it, and everything that gave you an AR, VR experience of what that pile of bricks actually signified. And here we have just so much of built heritage and architectural information. We don't necessarily showcase it in the way that we should, and therefore we are not the destination that we should actually be, and we do not attract the numbers of tourists that perhaps a place like Thailand or even Nepal in its past life used to. But Eric, let me go to you, and your book, your new book on Delhi. Is there anything that you will use that book to create this as an online experience? Are any of your walks and on as an online experience as well that people can actually experience. Of course, it's not the same experience as in when you walk through it in actuality, but is there a plan to do that as part of Ethiozoology or your new publication?
Thank you, Shaunjoy. Matter of fact, when one of the monuments in the book, which is in the Mehrauli Archaeological Park, the Kuli Khan tomb, which actually was preserved, restored during the G20 in 2023, when COVID restrictions had eased out, we were still not taking people out on walks, but we decided to do something called Kisse Dilli Ke, the Tales of Delhi. And the idea was to do a virtual tour of the location by taking you there through a camera, through a storyteller, and showcasing the entire monument, its niches, and the story, which has been very important since the beginning. And with the book, too, one of the things that I've realized is when you speak about history, as I said before, people are essential to it. And a lot of our history is formed through oral histories. Now, this goes back to the point I think that Dr. Sethi made, which is I would use the same logic here if I go online as the grid may use, that if you're taking submissions from people, if you're asking people to submit their suggestions or their stories, be it for Ethiozoology or the grid, history is to be seen as evolving and not fixed. So the grid could include, which is what we also want to do, a research in progress layer. And heritage knowledge then evolves, a new oral history, a new inscription that comes up, a new archive, or reinterpretations that gets submitted somewhere, and it becomes a sort of living research environment where the past is not static, which is what I also want to do at a personal level. Now, Shaunjoy, just for your point that you made about the Cholas and the bronzes, my mind goes to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where on the 1st of May, it will transform into this grand gala with the Met Gala. And the steps that we have to realize to getting to AR, VR, and immersive technology is our positioning in the public sphere first. Can you imagine an Indian curator being as lauded and celebrated in the public sphere as the celebrity the curator becomes at a Met or a Victoria and Albert or the British Museum? Now, I think where the grid can become important again is if we see it as an entity where research is always fed into it. And this includes research going into the museum. If you look at the National Museum, you literally have a stretch going from the Harappan civilization all the way to the 1800s in its visual and painting culture. But each aspect of it can be interpreted by a different curator. And it is that curatorial knowledge that then needs to get fed into machine learning, into AI systems. The person again becomes very important. And I think before leaping onto the step of a Vincent van Gogh experience, for example, we need to realize who is the person curating that, because history is, at the end of the day, built by all of us. And if we're going into an age of AI, we need to see how we can collaborate and not be fearing for our lives, because already we are thinking what's the future of the past. And then we say, let's bring in AI. Where do we go? So we have to think of collaboration. And I think that's where I'm looking at too.
Thanks, Eric. Fear, that's one issue that we should explore. Ratnesh, one of the things I know we talked about is the fact that much of what you've been doing, you've kept it to India. You haven't allowed it to be part of the World Wide Web because you have a concern. Can you share that concern with us? And is there a solution in terms of, can we change that concern through collaboration?
Sure. So one of the concerns I faced as we've been building these large databases, what should we expose on the internet? So we get bot attacks where, so we've had to put a very expensive firewall on our website where we are blocking countries. So somebody from the USA or from Russia cannot actually see us. All right. And the reason is very simple. We were trying to make webs for people of Meerut, of Jaunpur. So we aren't even, initially our design has been very local. So we want to be the local website where locals come. Yeah. And this tourism aspect was not our focus, although for us, it's a quick win. It's very easy to do this in English and make a web which highlights the salient points. But the local webs that we started making, the last thing we wanted was all our effort be screen scraped. So we've started blocking some of the various IPs and several countries, and that's been one way that we've addressed this, because there's a lot of effort in documenting the undocumented, and there's no point in that we are way past that phase where all knowledge is free and put on the websites. Actually, today, outside of Google, the largest amount of books of English language being scanned and freely put on the web are from India. So I think we need to, at this point, I think we need to make guard our local webs to some extent. What is local, and we must have a very clear-cut understanding of what is the information which is for non-locals. So let's call it the tourism web. Underlying it, I think it's time to have a database-based approach to the work we're doing, right? So I think this is the way. There are lots of see, these nuances are right here. We know them. I mean, Eric mentioned Alwar. In that district, while we are talking languages, one of the India's Brahathari, he actually retired to Alwar, and he lived in a cave and was probably eaten there. And then these rumors started about haunted places. So Brahathari caves should be something which is a tourist site for modern day India when we are talking large language models and importance of languages, right? It's one of the most important contributors to linguistic history of India. But then where is this getting lost? It's not entirely lost. There are 2 temples with some dedication to Brahathari. So some locals do know about it. But go Google search this out, you won't get this easily, right? So there is, now should we be putting this up so that people use Google to get there, or should we do it in a more organized way, right? And I'm still suggesting that we need to have an organized way. And I think that this is where the government has a significant role in trying to create physical spaces, and then the information and connected to a digital space, and then stuff like this will start flowing, right? So there are layers and layers of history, and there are layers and layers of both natural resources and cultural resources that we are sitting with. I think we need to put a little more thought to the let's call it the database structure. I would bluntly put it, just because we skipped the yellow pages phase. For instance, when we are talking of job creation, I've had to make a software 5 years back, which is India's first software in local languages for yellow pages. So there is no web. We haven't made an app where a mochi sitting in a town, say even a Lucknow, who doesn't know English, can just with his smartphone create his profile in Hindi and say, I'm sitting under this tree today, right? Or this is my shop today. If you don't know English, the web is largely blocked. Even registration process on an Amazon web shop, on an Amazon site is very lengthy, very bureaucratic, and very much English dependent. So I think we need to start looking at creating a Hindi web, a Tamil web. And within that, this is where the local versus global aspect will make a distinction. Doing the English web, I think that's the easiest today. And connecting it with databases, I think we're at that point where this is. So I think this is my suggestion. I mean, I would say the physical spaces need to be thought through, but more importantly, the centralized way of what information we are going to give only locally and what we are going to give internationally, and then what are we going to give to the Tamilian who's not fluent in English and wants to come to Ayodhya, Varanasi, and then the smaller sites relating to Allahabad. He needs that in Tamil. Let's not forget that. And guess what? We've got that maths today. I mean, it is Census 2011 data, which was revealed in 2018. We know, this interaction in very hard-coded terms. And Europe has a desire to do a multilingualism survey. Today, there's a big desire for many years that how many Germans also know some level of French, some level of Spanish. They don't have this data. In India, we have it. So I think this is a cultural asset. It's very precise. And this can leapfrog us ahead of the rest of the world. So we need to know. I mean,
you're absolutely right, Ratnesh. We've set up a new festival called Avakai in Vijayawada. And one thing that came home to us when we were there, because people like us in the Delhis and Bombays assume that English and Hindi is accessible all over Yet when you go to these places, you know that is language, 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 and it's absolutely important. I'm going to wrap up by asking Ritu a very specific question. You know, talking about what Ratnesh said, Ritu, about what should be accessible locally, what should be accessible in a more larger community. In terms of digital empowerment of artists, which is something that, again, we started looking at from COVID and thereafter, what do we need to do to be able to also protect their skill set and yet digitally empower them? And the second byproduct of that question is, what do we need to do for those people who are not part of this net, which are people with disabilities, for whom I think this sector can be hugely useful in creating and generating jobs and making sure that that 1/6 of our population that has some disability or access disability has gainful employment given the creative sector?
You know, Sanjay, very complicated question, but I'm going to try and answer it. You know, I work on online encyclopedia called Asia Ancient Encyclopedia. And I truly believe in open access. And I'll tell you why. Because very few of us have access to great schools and colleges, but we have access to the global internet. So because we are a small organization with very limited funds, we have Google Translate into all the Indian languages. Yes, very often garbled, but it's out there. There are pictures and you can access craftspeople and you can access performers, you can access them across. Now, I meet people wherever I travel to say, we used your encyclopedia. We didn't know this existed, this tradition existed. I find people getting in touch saying, because of you, we got orders. Very small, minuscule, because we are a small organization, but you can see how it can be projected upwards, number one. Number two, I was in conversation the other day it was on marketing and design, and intermediaries like boutiques and those who run digital stores were complaining that the craftspeople they work with are seeing exactly how much they are charging for their product. They are on Facebook and Instagram, because now you have Translate even there, and they are selling the same product that they're giving the store for 10% less and saying, buy from us directly. You know, Sanjay, the world is changing. When I teach at NIFT, I ask the students there that who among you knows how to sew, to knit, to weave, to cast, and not one hand is raised. So the world is changing, albeit slowly, but language is not a barrier. Digital literacy is growing. Anywhere I travel, I can't even talk to people because they're all on their phone. Goodness, I'm right here. Hello, speak to me. But there is something going on. They're making their videos, they're posting it. I have great hope. And that is why I would recommend for this cultural grid to make it a Facebook. Don't post everything. Let people post. Have your gatekeepers. Yes, you must, because God only knows what. We know a lot of nonsense goes on, but make it an Indian cultural Facebook. Google has this fabulous Google Cultural Institute. We have to, why do we post a lot at Google Cultural Institute. Why should we? We should post on the Indian cultural grid. There should be access. We have these best practices. Let's indigenize them and do it in our own way.
Thank you very much, Ritu, and thank you, Eric Chopra, Saurabh Mishra, Ritu Sethi, Ratnesh Mathur. Thank you all for this very insightful conversation. I'm going to end on the note of what Ritu said, great hope. I'm not entirely sure about the Google culture stuff. I think that that's the new colonialism that's taking over. They're sort of aggregating everything. And we need to, as you've said, Ritu, and as Saurabh has said and Ratnesh has said, We need to create our indigenous systems using our language and our craft and architectural and built heritage traditions to be able to build out our own systems and find our own models, which are good practices, starting at the district level. So thank you very much, the Ministry of Culture, for making this happen. I hand right back over to Joint Secretary and Secretary.
Thank you, Sanjoy, for always bringing out the best from all of us. And of
Thank
course,
you,
the
Ritu.
Ministry of Culture, Secretary Lily Pandey, Shah Faisal, all the other marvelous people.
Thank you. Back to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanjoy, and thank you to all the esteemed panelists. It has been a great session. Lots of insights, lots of suggestions. Some of the key suggestions which are very practical and doable, we will take it up. We will also follow up with a physical meeting with all the panelists to actually structure the nuances and the more granular details of the action points that are required for building the national grid, and also looking at the outcomes and the timelines for those outcomes, so that we can have a good solid arrangement, and we can have public-private partnership as the cardinal principle on which this national destination grid is built. So now I'll move on to the next session. This is a session on development and enhancement of Sanskriti, Sampada and heritage. Basically, the points were made that we have lots and lots of heritage. If we improve the amenities, if we improve the visitor experience, then it can make a huge difference. And also there is a requirement of having more focus on infrastructure. It may be museums, public libraries, our cultural spaces, the streetscapes, that is the archaeological streetscapes, and other elements of creative economy which can be integrated. So I'll now hand it over to Joint Secretary Gurmeet, who will give a presentation on this scheme, how it is shaped. This is called the Development and Enhancement of Sanskrit Sampada and Heritage. And then we will hand it over to the very able panelists who are coordinated by Ms. Shikha Jain, who will be the moderator for the session. And we have a very esteemed panel of archaeologists and people who have worked in this sector for a very long time. So I'll hand it over to Gurmeet to make a presentation and then take it forward. The session time is 1 hour 10 minutes, so we stick to the session.
Very good afternoon. I'm here to make a small presentation about the scheme Desh, that is Development and Enhancement of Sanskritic, Samprada and Heritage. Next, please. So it stands on 3 pillars. So the first one is the sub-scheme 1 of the Desh scheme, which is a center sector scheme. The scheme is development of excavation, site and heritage complexes. The idea, as was discussed in the previous session, and as just said by the Secretary Sir also, that we have got a lot of culture and heritage in the country, but somehow we are not able to provide that visitor experience to the people who visit that site. So idea is to develop 15 iconic sites and monuments as a world-class places to first of all have integrated master planning for the nationally significant archaeological sites in the monument. So it will be a wholesome experience. It will be a wholesome development with the development of archaeological site, as well as providing interpretation centers, providing museums, providing cultural spaces as a part of the experience, to have cafes, to have souvenir shops. To give you the background, the story of the archaeology in India has been that the archaeologists, they open up a site and they study that site. They take out the artifacts which come out of the site, and they generally are placed in the site museum or any of the other museum which we have. Then a report on the excavation is written, and then the whole site is covered up again to save it from the vagaries of the nature. Now that somewhere deprive the future visitor to that place about the experience from that side. They are not able to appreciate. They are not able to be a part of the process of the discovery to the conclusions arrived at by the archaeologist about the site. Now we want that whole thing to change. We want to open up the site and let it remain open for the people to appreciate the particular site. We want to cover it up. We want to create pathways around the sites. We want to have an interpretation center so that in addition to looking at the site, people can also visualize how people or how the civilization was then. So and then the cultural places and then the other development. We want people to come with the family. We want the youth who right now presently prefer to go to mall to come to these places and experience the heritage and the culture of India. We want to provide the world-class site museum and interpretation centers. We want to have the dedicated conservation strategies so as to enable this site to remain open for the future. And then, of course, the infrastructure development with immersive AR/VR experience. So that is the first component. The outlay which is provided for the next 5 years is around 1,481 crores. The other pillar, the other two pillar, I would say, in fact, the first one is Nirman, that is National Initiative for the Revitalizing Museum, Art and Cultural Network. And the third pillar is SSUY, Sanskritik Sampada Utthan Yojana. So as I said in the beginning, this is the infrastructure scheme for the Ministry of Culture, and the component 2 and component 3 were part of the earlier schemes of Ministry of Culture also, but they were scattered and they were part of various schemes rather than putting all of them together. So effort here is to bring the infrastructure component of all the schemes together, have a clear defined responsibilities of the state and the centers, have a provision for not just the capex provision, but to have the provision for the operation and maintenance with the coordination of the state government. So the sub scheme 2 is for the greenfield expansion. It covers 6 components. So the new museums, which were earlier part of the museum grant scheme, that is the first component. Then we have the science cities, which were earlier part of SPOCS, that is the scheme for promotion of culture of science, that is the second component. Then we have National Mission of Libraries. The fourth component was Tagore Cultural Complex. So they were all part of the existing schemes, but we have also added 2 components. These are the new components as a part of this proposed scheme. This is heritage streetscaping projects, because we have still some of the cities where we have the streets with traditional heritage look. Now, the challenge which we have right now is how to preserve them and how to promote them and how to convert them more and more so as to still leave for the future generation the things they are and they were. And the last component, which is a new one, is the creative economy ecosystem and the linkages with livelihood hubs. The third component is for the brownfield modernization, the existing museum, the existing libraries, the existing science centers, to upgrade them, to modernize them, and to create capacity among the stakeholders. And so upgrade the legacy museum, the science centers, the digitization of the library, archives, and the artifacts, and the revamping of cultural complexes and modern tech. The outlay for the next 5 years for the Nirman, that is sub scheme 2, is 4,200 crores, and for the sub scheme 3, it's 800 crores. Sub scheme 2 is center in the state, that is a centrally sponsored scheme, and the sub scheme 3 is a center sector scheme. Next, please. So coming back to the sub-scheme 1, which is a center sector scheme regarding the development at 15 archaeological sites in the monument. So the strategic goal, as I said, is to have world-class tourist destination, to make them a world-class tourist destination, and from a passive conservation to active curated visitor experience. We want the visitor who visit these sites to carry memories with them and to establish India as a global leader in heritage management and presentation. The key focus area is to have the intervention in a contextual way, in a holistic, as a part of the holistic plan, to upgrade and develop the site museums and the interpretation center. Many of these places already have interpretation center, but they are not equipped. They are not as per the world standard. So we would like to modernize them. Whichever these places where we don't have the interpretation center, we would like to have it, because without the interpretation center, it's very difficult to imagine what people are looking at. And some of the places where there is a museum, but it's very old, so we want to expand it, we want to renovate it, and all the sites where the excavation has taken place will be incomplete without the interpretation center or the museum. So that is again the focus area. The funding and the execution, it's 100% central funding. The 5-year outlay is 1,481 crores. Next, please. So to give you the detail of these 15 iconic sites and why they matter. So the first one and the foremost is Lothal, where a massive scale project is already being undertaken by Shipping Corporation of India. And the National Maritime Heritage Complex, which is coming up. So Lothal, as we know, is one of the earliest Sindhu Saraswati site, and it basically have the documentation or the evidence of a dockyard.
Can you quickly go through the details?
Yes. And the Dholavira is one of the great sites in Gujarat. Agroha, which is the capital, which is supposedly the capital of Raja Agrasen. And there are Kushana period stupa also. The Leh Palace, which is the architectural marvel of Namgyan dynasty. Purana Kila, as we know, is linked to Indraprastha and is supposedly the capital of the Pandavas. Adi Chinnalur is one of the largest megalithic burial sites in Tamil Nadu. Rakhigadi in Haryana is one of the largest Sindhu Saraswati site in India. Udaygiri in Odisha, which is a Buddhist site, and which are very close to Ratnagiri and Lalitgiri. They form a circuit, tourist circuit. Chittorgarh Fort, which is the epicenter of Rajput dweller. Iran in Madhya Pradesh, where we have found a massive colossal Varha and Narsimha sculpture. Sarnath, where the Buddha gave his first sermon. Hastinapur, which is the Kuru's capital and Jain holy place also. Sannati, where we have the only sculpture of Ashoka we have found from this place. Jhansi Fort, which is a symbol of the first freedom struggle of India. And Shivasagar, which is the capital of Ahom dynasty. So as you can see, these are the places which are very important historically. And as stated by Honorable Prime Minister also, these are not the places which are currently on the tourist map. But with these developments, we expect they will become a tourist place. They will become a magnet for further development and integrated circuit development of tourism. Next. So some of the pictures, the first one is Adichuluru. Second, they are the existing pictures where we have provided a temporary shed in Adichuluru. Rakhigadi archaeological site. Sarnath Museum, this was the first museum which was set up as a site museum by ASI in 1904. We want to expand it because the rich collection there is, so it will do, we will be able to do justice to the collection which is already there. Purana Kila. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed aerial view of Lothal, the proposed development plan. The next one is Eran. I talked about the massive sculpture of Varaha, which we have there. The next one is Chittorgarh and Shivasagar. Next, please. So the transformative impact, the infrastructure. So infrastructure, of course, we want to make walkway, pathways around it for the people to appreciate that site. Universal access and visitor amenities, AR/VR storytelling, immersive experience, and site-specific conservation strategies. Employment, of course, direct employment and the indirect employment. So the museum operators through the direct jobs, through conservation, local artisans and MSME market linkages, train guides, and the tourists, they will be part of the tourist circuit, and they will be branded as a Indian heritage places. And with the people who will come, so the local hospitality sector, the whole area will become developed. So this is what we have seen with Dhalavira also. So since the time it has become a World Heritage Site, that was a place out of nowhere. So there was nothing, in fact, till 15 to 20 years ago. But now it's a thriving place with a lot of resorts which have come up, and the schools, school children, and all kind of people, all the people who are experienced or who are interested in the field of heritage and culture. It has become a thriving, developed place. So we hope that all these places with the development will become a developed place in the near future. Next, please. So now talk about the second component. This is the Nirman overview. So this is about setting up of new museums.
You completed in 2-3 minutes.
So new science centers, new libraries, new cultural complexes, heritage streetscaping, and the creative economy hubs. Next, please. So this particular component is a centrally sponsored scheme. So with a 60-40 component of central and the state, and the evaluation will be DPR based. There will be a MIS monitoring. The special part about this is the sustainability, which we have ensured through O&M, the separate provision for O&M. And for the streetscapes, there will be we will encourage PPP investment, and with the viability fund gap investment from the center. Next. So this is the third component, where the idea is to upgrade the existing museums, the libraries, the science center, and the cultural complexes. The outlay for the next 5 years is 800 crores. Next. Next, please. So with this scheme, we hope that we will be able to achieve the vision of Bharat, that is Viksit Bharat 2027, with global heritage benchmarking, cultural innovation livelihoods, professional institutions, and national pride. So for the session today, we have eminent guests and experts, starting from Dr. B.R. Mani, former Director General, National Museum, Dr. Vasant Shinde, he is the Director General, National Maritime Heritage Complex, Ms. Malini Thadani, she is Executive Director, World Heritage Fund, Mr. Janvid Sharma, he is Additional Director General, Archaeological Survey of India, Ms. Abha Narayan Nama, she is Principal Architect, ANL Associations, Mr. Sabyasachi Mukherjee, Director General, CSMVS, Mr. Abhijit Datta, he is Director General, NCSM, and Ms. Avantika Dalmia, Co-Chair, Sabita Foundation. Ms. Shikha Jain will be the moderator for the session. We have structured the session in 4 categories, starting from archaeology as a living heritage, then from excavation to experience, heritage tourism. The third one is institutional framework for the destination development. And the fourth one will be urban heritage integration, museum, streetscapes, and visitor infrastructure. Now I request Ms. Shikha Jain, the moderator for today's discussion, to take it forward, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Joint Secretary Gurmeet Ji, for that elaborate introduction on the DESH schemes. Namaskar, everyone. My compliments to Secretary Culture and the Ministry of Culture for for this excellent scheme, which seems to have everything one could wish on the platter here. And of course, it looks at upscaling cultural infrastructure multiple times, besides seamlessly integrating the earlier fragmented schemes. Of course, there are a lot of challenges in implementation, and a number of suggestions are already there in terms of management and monitoring. And it's really a pleasure to be here today with the eminent panelists who can provide relevant feedback on various aspects of the scheme. I will start with the first panel, first session, which is on archaeology as living heritage. We have Dr. B.R. Mani, former DG National Museum, Dr. Vasant Shinde, DG National Maritime Heritage Complex, and Mr. Janvit Sharma, ADG ASEC for this session. Dr. Mani, I would like to begin with you. Given your vast experience and knowledge of excavating archaeological sites pan-India and even beyond, what is your view on accessibility of these archaeological sites, making them accessible to visitors, as well as challenges of conservation and archaeology with that? And I'm sure you're familiar with all of these 15 archaeological sites, besides most others in India. So what is your view on the potential impact of the works proposed on these 15 archaeological sites?
I think for the first time, the government of India has taken this initiative under 6 days for 3 subsidies, and first of them is the development of excavation sites and heritage complexes. And for the first time, I can say that such a huge amount has been planned for this particular aspect. And this is going to develop the entire 15 sites, which have we have listened about them, spread throughout the length and width of the country, represented by different cultures, by different time frames, and situated sometimes in the remote areas, sometimes in the cities. Those sites, as you rightly mentioned about the accessibility, which are located in the remote areas, like I can say Shivsagar Maidans, which have been recently included in the World Heritage List also. It's very difficult to reach to those sites. And even if one can reach, one may not find, in the present state, may not find the proper signages, the tourist facilities, the other tourist infrastructures. One cannot stay over there because there is a huge area which covers these Maidans. Nearby, there is no place to stay. And at present, there is no further development of the tourist facilities and infrastructure. So such sites will definitely be of much importance, on which the scheme will provide enough funds for development of the tourist infrastructure. And I think this list of 15 sites, in near future, we may have to add some more. Like I was thinking, Kalibangan is not there, which is equally important site, which has for the first time shown the early Harappan culture. Then Ahichatra is not there, which is the entire fortification, preserved with entire fortification. The entire city is there with rabbinical based and Jain traditions. And archaeological remains. Kaushambi is similar site. Nalanda is also included in the World Heritage, where proper or more infrastructural development is required. So at present, I can say that this scheme is very nice, covering 15 sites. So let us start with them, and then in due course of time, you can add some more.
Thank you, Dr. Mani. So I think we have a long way to go because India does have substantial archaeological sites. I will move on to Dr. Shinde. Sir, I've been, witnessing your involvement with Rakhigarhi for years, and specifically your interaction with the local community. And as Dr. Mani had mentioned, some of these sites are remote, some are in the urban area, but wherever they are, and specifically Rakhigarhi, which was remote, the engagement with the community becomes very essential. So I would like you to share your views on how the community can be engaged in these archaeological sites, and specifically because we are talking about archaeology as living heritage. And another question I have for you is, as you are creating a global benchmark with local museums, so what would be your advice for these 15 archaeological sites that are to be taken?
Shikha, thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the ministry for inviting me, Minister of Culture, for inviting me for this very important initiative, and the program that the Desh, which is very very ambitious and certainly required, needed for this country. So I am really happy that this initiative is being taken up by the ministry now. Now, first of all, I would like to mention that a lot of sites, archaeological sites, are being destroyed. And one example, for example, in the Saraswati Basin, in 1964, one of our students from Deccan College had discovered 450 sites, archaeological sites. And when I went there, in fact, to relook at the sites in 2006, to my surprise, I found that there are only 2 dozen sites left today. And most of the sites have been destroyed. They have been flattened and converted into agricultural fields by the local people. So we don't blame the local people, because the efforts that needs to be done from our side were not done, in fact, because we have to create a lot of awareness among the people. And my view is that unless the local people, the public participates in the activities, the Archaeological of India, state government, they have limitations. In fact, they cannot go to each and every site and protect. But if we can involve the local communities, I think they are really very good, maybe our guardian of the ancient sites. When I went to Rakhigarhi in 2010, I wanted to excavate the site again. So the first reaction from the villagers was that we will not allow you to excavate here because we have got very bad experience. You people come here, you people get the publicity, and we do not get anything from the site, from this this type of work. So that was genuine difficulties, genuine issues that they raised with me. But then I did not stop there. In fact, I started interacting with the local people, and I started giving them lessons about the importance of heritage and how this heritage, because they were thinking this is a curse for them. In fact, they're having site, archaeological site in the village is curse for them. But now the mindset of the people has changed, and now they feel that this is a blessing for them. So what I did, we interacted with them. I made them understand the importance of the archaeological sites. And the first sentence that I use, that this particular site has contributed immensely to the history of South Asia and to the world. I said that, don't you want to know, don't you want people to know about this? And then that is how it started. And today, earlier, people used to come there, they used to from different villages, different cities, and they used to collect the material. But today, because of the effort that we did, today they have formed the village protection group, and they do not allow, in fact, any destruction of the site. So, if you make efforts, it is possible. And secondly, now what I said that because of the work research here, maybe or development of the site, there will be economic benefit to the village and the surrounding area. And I'm really happy that whatever work we began, I think it was taken forward by the Archaeological Survey of India. They are developing the site from tourism point of view, and even State Archaeology Department also is developing one of the biggest museums. And my small effort, in fact, what I did, in fact, with the help of a small grant from the DST, Department of Science and Technology, I have developed a small interpretive center. I call this as a Harappan Knowledge Center. I think it is open. I think maybe everybody can go and see that. And that there's so much footfall now because of this. Because now there is something, at least when people visit there, they have something to know about the site. So that kind of efforts are really required, and this is very important that we think about this. Then when we excavate the site, I think one issue that we have in India, that we keep on excavating sites, but we do not publish the site reports properly. I think that is very important. I think we have so much data. I think for next 3-4 years, we should stop all the excavations and concentrate on writing the reports. All the factual data needs to come out. So I'm not blaming any one particular organization, or any particular society, but this is a general trend that's happening, and this is happening everywhere, in fact, in the country. So that should be stopped. In fact, that it should be made compulsory that they should produce a report. It is there, in fact, but I think that it should be followed very rigorously. Thirdly, I think we can develop the sites in such a way. Certainly, it is always good to talk about bringing in a lot of multimedia technology, etc. But whether those technologies can sustain in that region. So we should bring such technology only for the interpretation center or for the museum, which will maybe sustain in that region. Then only perhaps it will have a meaning. And we are very good, in fact, in developing the maybe museums and the interpretation centers like that. But how to operate that and maintain, as it was rightly mentioned by Joint Secretary, that operation and maintenance is very important. And that we need to really look into this particular aspect very carefully. Then the conservation and the preservation of the excavated material, I think that is very, very important. So far, in last 10 years, there is a lot of initiative now in this particular direction. If you want to convert the sites into from tourism point of view, I think whatever remains are excavated, they should be protected and preserved. And the Archaeological Survey of India is doing in fact at Rakhigarhi, and also they have a big plan at Lothal also. So I think this will be some kind of a model for the maybe other institutions who want to develop the site from tourism point of view. So that is very, very important, and that needs to be done. At Lothal, of course, we are developing the world's largest maritime heritage complex here, and perhaps one of the biggest national maritime museum at Lothal as part of the complex. And apart from developing or showcasing the maybe 5,000 years of maritime history at one place through 14 different galleries, what we are also doing here is that we are trying to have proper integration between the archaeological site and also between the museum, with the help of both the ministries, Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways, and the Ministry of Culture. So we are having to we are trying to have proper coordination, so that the things that we showcase at museum is not replicated at the site, and visitors should come at both the places. In fact, they should visit the site and they should come to the museum, and that is how the footfall can be increased. So that is one thing that we are developing. Secondly, the Honorable Prime Minister had visited this Lothal, our museum, on 20th of September, and he gave very good suggestion that we should identify the local educated students here, and train them from point of view of maybe local guides. They can be they can act as local guides, in fact, at the archaeological site, at the museum also. So that will, the benefit is going to go to the villagers and the surrounding area. Secondly, there is a lot of traditional craft which is dying, in fact. So I think there is a need to revive this craft. And so we are taking initiative in this particular aspect also. Maybe this will be some kind of a example impact for others also, that how the benefit can be can spread to the villages and the local people. That is very very important. So we are doing that also. And as a part of the, see, in India we do not have state of the art conservation lab for the artifact. I think we are creating that state of the art maybe conservation lab at our museum in Lothal. So maybe in India we should have such kind of facilities. Maybe we can involve maybe INTAC also, because they also are into this particular conservation also. So involve and have collaboration with different agencies, involve the universities, institutions like INTAC and the state governments, and maybe we can carry out whatever plans we have that can be taken forward. And also what we are doing in fact at Lothal, that there are two important things that we are also people, we are developing, say, maybe hotels and restaurants, so that the visitors can stay here maybe for a few days. And if the people are staying here, and we have identified the tourist circuit also around the site of Lothal. So what is there around the site of Lothal, maybe natural heritage, cultural heritage, so they can maybe make a visit of that. And also the government of Gujarat, they have created a Lothal area development authority, and the area around Lothal, maybe Lothal village, I think they have identified 200 square kilometer area around the site of Lothal. And there the development is going to be very systematic. Maybe new township is going to come up, but they have identified where what part should be preserved for maybe interpretation center, what part for the maybe for the artist, and for the hotels and restaurants. I think that is very very important plan. And we have suggested them to adopt the Harappan plan for this particular Lada. So that is also very very important development happening here. So maybe that can be also replicated at other sites also. And
I think you
yeah.
touched upon very important points. We'll be coming back to it on the implementation and mechanisms. So we'll again discuss it.
Sure.
I would like now to move on to Mr. Janvik Sharma.
Sure.
Specifically related to World Heritage, archaeology, conservation. What do you feel, Mr. Sharma, are the challenges in taking forward these 15 archaeological sites as the benchmarks at the global level?
Thank you very much, Dr. Shikhar, and also to the Ministry of Culture for having me as one of the panelists, and good afternoon to all the panelists. Dr. Jain, your question is multi-layered, and I'll try to respond and sort of split it into 2 or 3 segments. One, of course, is I'll very briefly talk about Archaeological Survey of India, and then the balancing that you talked about, and then leveraging the base scheme and looking at the global context. To put things in perspective, Archaeological Survey of India, founded in 1861, it's a 165-year-old organization. And all would agree that there aren't many organizations in the world as old or as ancient as ASI is, mandated with the task of preservation conservation. As we speak, we have 3,686 monuments under the purview of the protection of ASI, and that includes 27 World Heritage sites also. India has 44, and out of which the major chunk is with the ASI. Now, we have typically our traditional pursuits of archaeology and conservation. So there is a continually, I would say, evolving archaeological narrative, and more sites are being discovered. Or, the new excavations at the same site are revealing new details about our rich past. And conservation also is one of the important mandates wherein our effort is to preserve the monuments, keep them as in the condition that they were found. But wherever required, the structural conservation, the preservation, or the environmental upgradation is something that we look after. Now, in the initial presentation, I think my colleague, Mr. Gurmeet, mentioned, in a sort of a passing way, that how ASI at some point in time, when it was doing excavation, it would, after excavation and documentation and report writing, the sites would be closed. And of course, the communities, the visitors would be at loss to understand what those sites actually yielded, what the structures look like, and what storytelling that it had. But I must mention here that ASI is also changing its viewpoints from being very puritanic to now we are also ensuring that more and more sites are being presented to the public. And the experiences, the storytelling is something that comes along with it. And I obviously have many examples to quote or share from that. And therefore, our renewed focus in, say, last decade or so has been in this aspect, where apart from archaeology and conservation, we're also looking at providing visitor amenities. So I think all the World Heritage monuments that at least are under ASI and all the monuments where the tickets are levied, is something, all the basic amenities are provided, whether they are washroom facilities or improved access or signages. And so all these aspects are being looked into. Now, I wouldn't give ourselves 10 out of 10, but I think this is a work in progress where we are working, and providing amenities at as many monuments as possible. Now, you also touched upon balancing. I think herein the balancing is in two aspects that I can look at. One is, of course, in terms of the physical fabric, and any interventions that we are doing doesn't harm the physical fabric. But the second is in terms of the communities, and my predecessor, Professor Shinde, talked about engaging with communities, and I think this is again something that we are now doing at right earnest. And many of the monuments, which are perhaps some of the monuments which are living, but even those which are not living, the communities that are associated with it or sort of living around it, is they're now continuously being engaged. In fact, the site management plans that we are working on right now for all World Heritage and important monuments across the country, engaging with communities in terms of decision making is something that we have now started in great earnest. Now, from this perspective, the DESH scheme is something that takes or attempts to take this experience further. The 15 sites, as was elaborated by my colleague, Mr. Gurmeet, actually has two very interesting or critical attributes. One is that there is a geographic equidistribution. So we've taken sites from all across the region. And the second is the typological distribution. So some of them are very important archaeological sites from where, and some are obviously are very important monuments or the remains. And each of these sites, 15 sites that have been picked up, are very important from the point of view of the contribution they make to India's past or India's rich history. Now, I've been a part of this whole process along with my senior colleagues from the ministry, and I can say that a lot of granular details have been worked out in terms of providing or enriching the experiences further than what it is available at the site now. And I think one of the focus that is going to be in the times to come, at least in these 15 sites, and Professor Shinde, we agree with you, yes, this number could increase, but at least to start with, we are starting with the 15 at the moment, wherein the use of digital experience or enhancement or the use of AI is going to be something that we will be looking into quite closely. Many of this, quite a few of these sites which were closed are being opened, and they will be presented again. And I think this will also be a model for us, where it will be an opportunity for us to look into the carrying capacity of some of these monuments, and we will be able to manage that also effectively through the scheme. So if that from that point of view, and I can speak of that component which ASI will be looking after, it provides a very unique opportunity for the government, for my ministry, and for the ASI to look at the holistic framework, wherein conservation, development, presentation, and dissemination about the site, and dissemination by virtue of using technology and AI, and to make this whole experience very wholesome and engaging. So I think this is what I would like to mention there.
Yes, I think the panelists in this session have brought up very relevant points, and of course the involvement of community as well as stakeholders, other stakeholders, and students, and pedagogical links also. Taking off from here, we move on to our next section, which is, from excavation to experiences. And we have three eminent panelists with us. Mrs. Malini Thadani, Executive Director, World Monuments Fund, Mrs. Abhanarayan Naga, Principal Architect, ANL Associates, and Mrs. Avantika Dalmia, Co-Chair of Sabhyata Foundation. I will start with Mrs. Thadani. With your experience with the World Monuments Fund, you have dealt with monuments across India and even overseas with the World Monuments Fund's reach. So what is your view in terms of the experiences and cultural circuits that can be developed in India and as proposed under the DESH scheme?
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Ministry and to the Secretary and Joint Secretary to invite me to join this very, very informative and educative session. And in fact, it's been wonderful hearing, starting from the Prime Minister's vision to the earlier panel, and some of my colleagues on this session, in this session as well. A lot of what I wanted to say actually has already been said. So at the cost of repeating, I just like to make a few points about what we've learned from our experiences of working on heritage restoration projects in India, and my colleagues with World Monuments Fund have experienced at overseas sites and locations as well. So I think one of the first things that we need to look at, and I think I'm glad that the DESH program is looking at this sector in this very, very organized way, is that we should move from site management to destination management. So we're not looking at an archaeological site or a heritage monument or a historic place just as a site, but as a destination that people can come to, learn from, and enjoy, appreciate, and admire, and be proud of. So I think that's something that we have to transition towards. And already people have spoken already of visitor capacity, carrying capacity, very important. The number of tourists to India, the foreign tourists, has in fact been surpassed by domestic tourists. We're going to see a great increase in domestic travel taking place. Of course, I hope that we are able to attract a whole lot of foreign visitors too. There's no reason why India should not attract the millions of visitors that small cities and places like Hong Kong, for example, or Singapore attract. So we must be very, very conscious of, say, carrying capacity for each of these sites and places that we are restoring and making available for our visitors to enjoy and to appreciate. Another sort of area that's already been discussed is really climate change, and we should be anticipating the changes that are already taking place in the areas that we want people to come and visit and engage in, and prepare for these simple things, sort of like water, sanitation. That's those are the basic needs for a visitor. We'll have to address those even before we make them available for more and more visitors. In terms of carrying capacity, I think this approach has been seen already in places like Machu Picchu in Peru, where I think you can book a place in Machu Picchu at least 6 months in advance, and they do not allow more than 3,000 visitors per day to that site. It is very fragile. I don't see why we can't do something like that in Ajanta, for example. Because, Lascaux, for example, in France, they have restricted the number of visitors to Lascaux itself, to the caves, to number only 5. But they have built a second site, another cave where they've replicated Lascaux. And now they have a Lascaux museum which has come up as an interpretation center for visitors to come in and see what the Lascaux caves actually look like. So this is something that we'll have to take. The most important thing is that we will have to not just look at infrastructure investment, but also management systems, so that we can transform heritage and conservation by engaging communities and making sure that our visitors are experiencing the same, sort of the best, in the best way possible. So moving on from here, I think the next point is that we should create cultural districts around major sites. And already we've got great examples. So the Humayun's Tomb, sort of complex has got the Sundar Nursery. You've got Hampi, which is a great, sort of development you can see taking place right now, where not just the monuments people are visiting, but also the communities, the culture that they want to absorb and to appreciate. So the infrastructure that we'll need there, the interventions will be, pedestrianization. Our cities unfortunately lack pedestrian pathways any case. But in heritage areas, we should look at those very, very actively. People are able to experience and internalize that much more of a heritage site if they're walking through an area rather than being rushed through sort of a city or a place. So that's very important. And engagement with, sort of the local community, cultural programming, very important, craft markets, sort of just engage the community, and standard signage. Jaipur, Pink City, great, sort of the major market, in Jaipur, everything is pink around Hawa Mahal, but you can see that is, some of the colors are changing. You can see that the signboards are changing, and people are slowly going back to chaos. So if we want to make this place, we want to make Jaipur, we want to let Jaipur remain a pink city, we should make sure that it is a pink city. Jodhpur, blue city, same thing. So a lot of visitors come to visit these places because of these tags that have been given to them. So we must make sure that we make that experience available to visitors. And I think, so very important is that, ownership and pride of the local community is very important, and economic benefit to the community. Only then will we be able to make sure that we are able to maintain and manage, a district or a city or a village or a whole precinct rather than just the monument. Because even, so looking at the Taj Mahal, when you go to the Taj Mahal, you are completely blown away by the experience of seeing the monument the first time. But when you're approaching the place, sort of the chaos that you have in the city, if we can find a way of bringing that to order, the visitor experience would be so much better. Because, we must also acknowledge that the visitor experience begins outside the monument gate, not at the monument. We've already spoken a lot about, sort of interpretation, museums, digital, some material and media that is available. Storytelling, I think that's very important. And, sort of interpretation models. And I'm glad, so there are 15 sites that have been selected for display to visitors and tourists. A few years ago, I visited Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and it's a desolate place. It's just, farmland, dry farmland when I went in the month of September. But when you go to Göbekli Tepe, you are completely blown away because you're able to experience everything that the archaeologists over there are sort of digging up and looking at and examining and studying. There's a very, very interactive interpretation center, and there are models there which are simulative, which allow people to actually experience what life in Göbekli Tepe would have been like 10, 11, 15 years, 1,000 years ago. So, interpretation and good interpretation transforms, sort of a monument into a story. And very importantly, we must make all this information interactive so that we can get our young people involved and interested. Because if we're not able to engage our young and the next generation, who's going to be the custodian for the future? And I liked the last session, there was a very nice line, which was that we have to plan for the future of the past. And I think that's a very, very good line to use. That's something that we must be very, very mindful of. Integrate communities as heritage partners, we've already spoken about that. And I think a wonderful example that I saw of that was my recent visit to Hampi, the village of Anegundi, where they've got craftspeople working, they have homestays, they have, you can have, if you're going for a day, if you're a day visitor, you have sort of a dining experience over there, you go on a heritage walk. And I think what struck me first about that village was how clean it was. And every villager and every home was prepared with great pride for visitors to come and to interact and to engage with the locals. So it was a phenomenal experience, and we should have, in fact, replicas of that all over, so wherever we have places like these. In Mumbai, you have fort walks. In Khotati Wadi, you have walks
Sorry,
which are really.
I just intervene because we have limited with time. I think you've given some excellent examples, and Anegundi definitely, coming from Hampi is a great model. You spoke about
Yes.
destination management, and I will ask Mrs. Lama, with her experience specifically when we are looking at destination management, how do you look at infrastructure development in and around the sites, because you dealt with many such sites. So please share your opinion on that.
She mute.
We can't hear your voice.
Should I share my screen again? Okay.
Yes.
Are you able to see my screen? So I would like to thank the Ministry of Culture and the Honorable Prime Minister. I think this is an initiative that is long overdue, and from excavation to experience is something that India definitely lacks and requires government insight and support. But it's also a delicate balance, and I think all of us have to be very cognizant of that. In 2005, I had prepared a site management plan for Lothal, and at that point, when I would go to site, the local watchman would be taking out beads and handing them over to people. And I've seen school children come back with sacks of historic Harappan beads. So it's so important to be able to better manage our sites, and therefore this initiative is very, very welcome. I would like to also draw the ministries and Secretary Culture's attention to some other extremely historic sites like Shishupalgarh Fort in Odisha, which is an ancient site and where rampant construction of houses, like people were digging, excavating their own foundations and completely killing the historic stratigraphy of this site. We spoke about, I'm very glad to know that Sarnath is one of the sites, and I hope that this would give due importance to the Sarnath Site Museum, which requires desperately expansion and upgradation, because as you can see from the photographs, though we have absolutely the finest artifacts from India's golden age, they are the design of the interiors, the exhibit design, the display is sadly lacking, and I'm glad that the ministry has taken this up as an initiative. Are my slides able to change, or am I stuck on the same slide? If somebody could please inform me. Also, now that the Maratha forts are inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, these are also largely archaeological monuments, and their management becomes key. And I would urge the government to look at what, when I was preparing the site management plan for Ajanta, the buffer was based on sight lines. So if somebody is at the base of the fort, there should be no obstruction of view, and that is especially important in a place like Junnar, which is rapidly increasing. I would like to draw the attention of the ministry to some sites that are archaeological sites, perhaps under state governments, but this also requires a fillip and a helping hand. Sites like Vair, for example, in Rajasthan, which is one of the finest Jat palaces, but more importantly, historic landscapes, where we unearthed under debris and under mounds acres and acres of parterres of these beautiful kyaris in stone, which were supposed to have acreages of planned horticultural landscape, which is unheard of across the world. And yet they have not even basic, there's not even a chai ki dukan or even a basic overnight stay facility, let alone any kind of support for such very vulnerable archaeological landscapes and horticultural landscapes. And sites such as Kuldhara, again in Rajasthan. Across Maluti in Jharkhand, we have some of the finest collections of terracotta temples in dire need of a site management intervention. And therefore, archaeology sites, I would believe, should be supported by an equal attention to local crafts and conserving knowledge systems. In my own experience for the Mughal Sarai in Punjab, Punjab has an amazing realm of caravanserai of the historic period. And yet we have seen, sadly, the loss of even material, let alone archaeological material, bricks and all being used by locals for their own construction. And therefore, both stabilization and conserving these sites, and at the same time, involving perhaps the local stakeholders in being able to conserve these sites is important, as is with my experience projects such as Chandramauleshwar in Hampi and many other. And since we are also talking of excavations, but we are also we cannot forget that as historic cities in India are largely getting underground metros, we need to start reviewing how these metro lines are functioning. And one such case has been, which has been a fortunate case, has been that of Jaipur Metro, where though the underground line was going through the most dense urban fabric and therefore archaeologically significant historic fabric of the walled city of Jaipur, I was a consultant on this project to Asian Development Bank. And while we were looking at Choti Chopper and Badi Chopper, we also realized through archival photographs that there was perhaps a kund which had been filled up, which had been lost for 150 years. So for the first time in India and in the world, a metro project became the grounds for an archaeological dig. And we were able to find the original kund, restore them, be able to find the original gaumukhs, and then create, not only restore this back, but also create an underground museum of archaeology. I would urge the Ministry of Culture to look at underground metro lines that are coming up across Indian cities, which have valuable archaeological significance, and to be able to do that, and then to take that as also an important an important aspect of that city's heritage, and be able to manage that through illumination of areas. And we are currently working on a similar site in Vadnagar, in the Honorable Prime Minister's birthplace, where Amba Ghat, which is a large ghat along the banks of Sharmishta. We have prepared a complete master planning, signage, visitor interpretation system, and that has helped be able to adopt local people and local skills at conserving an ancient monument and being able to portray it to the people as an integral part of the town's heritage. So I would like to end by saying this is a very, very important and a very welcome initiative. And I hope that the central government would also support, and maybe whether it's a carrot and stick policy, be able to intervene in other sites which may not be of national on the national register, but we have a lot of important archaeological sites which are under state monuments. Thank you.
So yeah, of course, as per data, we have about 45,000 archaeological sites in India. And it's quite a challenge. We start with the most significant ones. What you brought up are two very important points on community archaeology as well as salvage archaeology. And these, of course, would help with the overall experience, as you've also shown. I would like to ask Avantika ji, you have been a champion for experience building in heritage sites across Delhi. And I would like to hear about your vision for private sector involvement in building this experience. How can it contribute or augment to what is already being done by the central authorities?
Thank you, Shikhaji. I'm very grateful to the Honorable Prime Minister for his amazing vision. I thank the Culture Secretary and the Joint Secretaries for this intriguing session. Thank you for asking me to be on this panel. As everyone has shared, India is the only ancient civilization where people can actually experience our living traditions, heritage, and cultural assets. And this Desh scheme is very, very welcome. I think to increase our global international tourists as well as our domestic tourists, I think the youth today is really looking forward to experiences. So I think from what Sanjoy spoke about, Eric, a lot of our earlier panelists spoke about, how do we engage our youth into our history, into our heritage? How does our past become a living present for us? How do these beautiful spaces that we are conserving, preserving, become relevant to our future generations, is where I would like to add a layer, because I think everyone has already spoken on the importance of AI, broadband, basic amenities. I think make sure that people stay on in these monuments, in these places. however small it might sound, but water, toilets, basic essentials like accessibility, food, they make sure that the people who come there stay there longer. Making these pieces into living cultural spaces, which is where the creative economy, where the we come in, the experiences I think are as important a layer as a preservation and conservation, because that's what keeps them relevant. That's what makes the youth come learn. That's what makes the tourists come to these places and stay here. A seamless experience at a monument is important. From entry to exit, you should be able to plan your visit depending on how much time you want to spend in a place. As with our infrastructure projects, in Heritage 2, the public-private partnership should be long-term and sustainable. It needs a properly defined framework to institutionalize it so that the responsibilities are clear and the decision-making is quick. Our common goal should be to increase footfalls. How do we make sure that our monuments are a part of everyday lives of our youth? How do we make our heritage relevant to them? I'm repeating this again because I think, as Eric was saying, it's amazing that we have our youth coming in, becoming, aggregators for people to come and learn about our heritage. For this, we need to transform our heritage spaces into living spaces. In addition to the facilities mentioned earlier, we need to make them more spaces for people going for morning walks, photo walks, heritage talks, art competitions for school students. Basically, make them into thriving economies with vibrancy. That's how, even with our crafts, other people, when we're talking about the local economy, generating income, schools and colleges should make monument visits a part of their curriculum, not just a day out, so that the learning is also there. Not just, I went to a monument, I saw it, I came back, you question me tomorrow, I don't know what I saw. Marketing of experiences at monuments is also very critical to this initiative. While social media is easier for private sector to help with, we need government assistance in promoting the sites. Like the way the Culture Secretary had got the UNESCO thing happening at the Red Fort. Such initiatives, when dignitaries and delegations come to monuments, it brings them more into the public eye. It creates more of an awareness. A budgetary spend on promotion will help immensely in accelerating the awareness. It's unfortunately sometimes when we invite people to events, I have to tell them Purana Killa is near the zoo. I have to tell them Safdarjung tomb is at the end of Lodi Road. So, these are unfortunately things that exist in our current space. And we need to build an awareness, and that will only happen when all of us work together towards it, towards a common goal. I think another great suggestion was, integrating monuments into tourism circuits that was put up. Rather than, just being a heritage monument, the museums, hospitality, cultural programming, retail and local crafts, all becoming one seamless visitor experience, I feel will really help us take the Desh Scheme forward. And really, the destination level coordination will help us convert visitor flows into longer stays, higher engagement, and greater economic values. India has immense potential to adopt several models across heritage cultures. If we get this partnership model right, India's monuments can evolve from protected structures into vibrant cultural ecosystems that educate visitors, support local livelihoods, and strengthen our cultural identity. I feel in many ways, this is a journey from excavation to experience, and it is an opportunity India is uniquely positioned to lead. I'm not going to repeat the other points that others have taken. So, Shikhaji, thank you. Over to you.
Sure. So this further enlightening section on the experiences. Now we move on to the institutional mechanisms, because that will become very critical for the executive of the scheme. So I will go back to Dr. Mani, Dr. Shinde, and Mr. Jamal Sharma. If you can, briefly comment on the implementation mechanism, like management and monitoring already specified under the Desh Scheme. Would you like to comment and give any input on how it can be augmented, or any role models that you may think are there, whether in India or overseas?
As we had been discussing about the sites which are there in the remote areas, particularly we have to see that the local government and tourism or tourist agencies can provide more help under this scheme to develop these sites and in building tourism centers with parking, cafeteria, toilets, other infrastructure details, staying arrangements around or in the vicinity of the monuments so that people can stay there, enjoy the beauty and heritage of the monument. So, in brief, I can say that we have to depend on tourism and the local governments, as we have also noticed recently in Sarna, where I had been there for this meeting on the World Heritage Committee. The representatives of ICOMOS were there. So we found that earlier it was all in a very messy state around the monument and around the museum, and now we find that proper shops have been allotted to the local people who are adept in craftsmanship, building sculptures, small terracotta sculptures, and other related things which are connected with the monument. So tourism is basically developing that, the UP tourism, and other tourist agencies can also help in such development of infrastructure.
Mr. Sharma, would you like to?
Shouldn't I thought? But thank you very much for asking this rather pointed question, because now you're talking about the implementation of the DESH scheme and what institutional mechanisms are in place and what needs to be done to further refine it. As I mentioned in my previous intervention, that a lot of details have gone into preparing this scheme, and obviously it was led by my secretary from front. So therefore, a lot of issues related to the selection of the sites, what needs to be done, and how will it be implemented, the tendering and all that is something that we have already worked out. So from that point of view, we are reasonably assured that that the scheme will see the light of the day, and it will help us provide a very different kind of an experience for the visitors in times to come. And we have a time span of 2 to 3 years where visible changes will be visible, can be seen at the site. However, there are indeed institutional challenges that we need to look at, and this is from our experience for handling, the conservation and the management of the monuments under ASI. The first is, of course, it also needs that we need to augment our own capacities, the human capacities. We need to have more trained people who should be there at the site, who should be monitoring it, and also, looking at the whole management perspective that needs to be worked on. But at the same time, I think because it will also mean that we are engaging with the professionals. Their understanding also needs to be, I would say, oriented to a certain extent, because if you're engaging with architects or conservation architects, usually they have their own ways of working. But when you're handling a site or as sensitive as some of these monuments, the 15 monuments that are in question, so a little bit of orientation is needed for them to establish what kind of interventions can be done without disturbing the fabric of the monument or of the archaeological site, the visual impact, and so on and so forth. And of course, also how do we enrich the experience? And here, if you talk about model, I think one model that comes to my mind is what the Ministry of Culture recently intervened in Vadnagar. Vadnagar, from one excavation to the wholesome experience that is being provided, whether it is in terms of archaeology or the excavation, whether it is in terms of conservation, whether it is in terms of the site dissemination, the site museum, and the interpretation that has come up. But then it has led further beyond. It has led to the urban regeneration, wherein a couple of streets are being remodeled as per the 19th or the early 20th century kind of an urban scape, to its eventual, positioning as possibly a World Heritage property, because it's already on the tentative list. and we have submitted a preliminary assessment proposal. So that wholesome experience is something that I think more, and in fact, 15 sites, out of which only one is World Heritage at the moment, which is Dholavira, but all 14 also have a potential to become World Heritage. So it signals in a sense a journey also, rather than just a destination development from augmenting the site to eventually it getting a larger status at some point in time in the near future. Thank you.
So it's great to have one model with us at Vadnagar. Dr. Shinde, would you like to comment on any other model that you would like to refer to?
I think, I think our panelists have given really good overview of what we should do. But I think, 2-3 things I would like to points I would like to mention that through this DESH program, maybe one thing that through museums and the excavations and the archaeological sites, we can try to decolonize the minds of the youths, because the history that was taught to them is completely different, and we are getting completely very good evidence in that. For example, we have the impression that we have learned the shipbuilding activities from the Romans, but actually the Romans have learned from us. So that kind of maybe a new maybe contribution of India to the world, to the science of technology, that needs to be brought out. Secondly, what is the relevance of the heritage studies, in fact. For example, one relevance I can tell you that the water management, which was put in use by the Harappans at Dholavira, it is so relevant, even we can put that to use even today. So that kind of maybe awareness program needs to be run also. And lastly, our knowledge system is so important. Even today, there are a lot of communities who are still following our traditional knowledge system for last 5,000 years. I think how we can preserve this knowledge system, and how the benefit of that, maybe whatever research we do, how the benefit can go to the society. I think that needs to be looked also, apart from developing sites from tourism point of view, etc. So then only perhaps the youth will be will get a proper idea about what is our real history and what you have contributed to their maybe nation and to the world history, in fact. So these are the points that that are also equally important.
Definitely, I think knowledge systems and the youth, and we already had Eric in the last session, as an example for that. What we would like to now do is move on to our last session, which is on museums, streetscapes, and digital infrastructure, a complete urban heritage integration. And we have on board Dr. Sabyasachi Mukherjee, DG CSMVS, Mr. Arijit Chaudhary, DG NCSM, and Mrs. Ava Narayan Lamba. Dr. Mukherjee, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so I mean, we cannot have a museum dialogue without your presence, of course, with the way CSMVS has created a model. So we would like to know, learning from CSMVS, what would be the takeaways for the museums in India? I'm sure you've looked at the scheme. There are two segments, Nirman and the upgradation of museums, which is proposed. So what would be your recommendations specifically in this case?
The CSMVS Mumbai is one of the few cultural institutes in the country, or maybe the institute in the country supported by the people for the people, unaided by the government, which is very rare. And it's doing well. The thing is that it's flourishing. And the three takeaways you were talking about, the first thing it comes in my mind, very strong, community participation in museum development. So because we are supported by the people, everything, my salary is coming from the community. My staff salary is coming from the community, exhibitions, development, everything. And then the second, takeaway, if you ask me, our partnership with different institutes and collaboration. At present, we are working 33 institutes in the country and 24 institutes outside the country, and 25 universities also working with us. Last 400 schools, and we have a very strong education department, reaching out to people. If you cannot come to the people, if you cannot come to the museum will come to your doorstep through our outreach program. And the third, takeaway, it's creative leadership and transparent administration. So these three things, I can.
Thank you. I think you mentioned about sustainability, financial and otherwise with the community, as well as collaborations, which are very significant for the museums. Of course, I would like to also add what you always say about museum leadership. So we do need more museum leaders and training programs probably to take these through. Anything else you would like to add, or I will move on to Mr. Datta?
And my only suggestion, I was very fortunate to participate in the conversation, and thanks to Secretary and Joint Secretary for giving me the opportunity. My 30 years experience, professional experience, there are certain areas, specialized areas. So museum profession, it's a specialized area. You need, specialists. And country is blessed with cultural heritage. Every kilometer you encounter with different culture. And that is, our diversity, and we are very proud of. And the country, created so many iconic institutes like IITs and IIMs. And unfortunately, we could not create one single institute on par with IIM, IIT dedicated to heritage management, where you create cultural managers. And today you see how many cultural managers you have. How you are going to manage things, how you maintain quality. So these are the things, you need to think very seriously at this stage.
Thank you. Mr. Arjit Datta Chaudhary, I wanted to ask you specifically with your experience with NCSM, currently the scheme is looking at moving beyond the silos of library, museums and others, for a seamless integration. And in some sense, NCSM with its science museums has achieved a sort of synergy. You can see that identity, whether it's within a city like Kolkata or in the complete science museums across India. And also in terms of management and maintenance of the museums. So I would like you to elaborate on the potential of these schemes, to come up with cultural circuits, integrating museums, libraries, and other such cultural infrastructure.
First of all, thank you, Shikhaji, for giving us this opportunity, and the Ministry of Culture for creating this very important discussion. More so when Desh is being implemented very soon, and we have a lot of ongoing projects that are coming up across the country. Yes, to start with, as you said, yes, most of the, I would say the cultural institutions, they work in silos, and in spite of having very rich collections, a visitor, for example, a visitor walking into the National Museum in Delhi, when he moves out, he does not know that very close to it is the Sahitya Academy and also the Crafts Museum, which can all be integrated into one single experience for the visitor. So these are, I think, what we are doing is we are leaving for the visitors to curate their own plans. I think this is a great opportunity how we can integrate all our cultural institutions across the city and across the country, and which will be beneficial for our visitors, for the students, for the research scholars. As far as NCSM is concerned, yes, we are very fortunate that we have a single network of 26 science centers under a single administrative umbrella, the largest across the globe. And we have 26 more science centers which we have developed. But we have a continuous interaction among these 26 science centers that we have handed over. Every year we meet at one location to share our experiences, to share our difficulties, to understand each other's requirements. And NCSM has an exclusive training and research lab here in Kolkata. So we extend training programs for all the science museum professionals, irrespective of whether they are from NCSM or from the other 26 science centers that has been developed and are being operated, though by the state governments, but there is an organic link with NCSM at all times. We are also involved in their modernization activities. So when it comes to Nirman, where we are continuing with the expansion of the science center networks, then supporting development of new museums under the museum grant scheme, then also a new model on digitization of the libraries, then the Kalagrams and the creative hubs that we are coming up under this scheme. It is also very important that while we develop this new facilities across, we ensure that that organic link continues to be there, so that the benefits that are being created through these projects, for example, under the museum grant scheme, Government of India through the Ministry of Culture is supporting development of new museums across the country. And these are not only very large museums, they are very small museums also. If we can create a network of all this together, so that people are aware of what are the different facilities available in this museum, probably it will be very, very beneficial for all the people. I'll just share you a small example. We very recently started a small, I would say, a digital initiative called Har Ghar Museum. Basically, we wanted to find out what are the different collections people have in their own homes, and just to understand how interested they are to network with us. And we got an overwhelming response from them. More than 100 individuals have come up with their collections. They shared with us, which is now available in our website and also in our social media platform. So these are small things which can help, especially the students and research scholars, to know about our very, very rich culture, our very rich heritage. I have a few suggestions as far as the Nirman is concerned. It's very important, some 6 pillars, I would say, of integration. We need to have a unified identity. It's very important that we develop a common cultural Indian network brand with a master identity and city of the institutional variants beneath it. Every museum, library, theater, and heritage site in the network carries the network mark alongside its own identity. I think that would be very, very beneficial for the people. If we can have a shared digital platform, so all the different organizations, different cultural institutions that we have, they have their own individual social media platforms, their own digital platforms, whether we can integrate them together so that as I would say, a student or a research scholar or as a visitor who is interested in our rich culture and heritage, we should be able to access everything from one single place. And that way, once we are visiting our different city, we'll be able to go and visit those places also, once we are aware of what facilities are available in different places. Then third, I think, which already Ministry of Culture has initiated, is integrated ticketing and a pass system. I think that is very, very important. It is our own experience, what we see in all our science centers. And for example, in Science City, Kolkata, during the peak days, people spend 2 to 3 hours buying tickets and standing in queues, in spite of having online ticketing facility. So making people aware of these facilities, making people giving people a facility for an integrated ticketing facilities. Like, for example, in Calcutta, during the peak seasons, we see people visiting Science City, we see people visiting Indian Museum, the Victoria Memorial, but every place has their own ticketing system. People spend a lot of time buying tickets there. So if you can have one single ticket, and subsequently probably with the help of the state government, whether we can have an integrated transport system also, that people from one museum, they can move to the next. I think these will be some huge benefits that will accrue through this activity.
Yeah, I think those are very relevant, and you are also talking about integrating with state systems. I think Abaji also spoke about it, and we are about to close the session now. So just one last statement I would ask Mrs. Lamba to, for the streetscaping scheme, because that is definitely where the ministry has moved beyond the borders to look into the urban sector, which you were recommending, Mr. Chaudhary also mentioned that. So if you can just be very brief about it, one closing statement.
Well, for me, I think it's community, community, community. And while we have 6,000 years of built heritage, our focus in the last 150 years has been monumental. And we now need to move out to the community, engage with them, and see conservation as a tool for sustainability, as a tool for social empowerment and local. Because unless we begin to make the local community proud of their heritage, they will not continue to build in the same material. They will keep, as we are seeing in Ladakh, we are seeing concrete and aluminum cladding, and that can only happen if community is engaged in conservation. And 20 years ago, Ladakh won its first UNESCO in Asia Pacific Award of Excellence. And what we had done with the community was literally the community creating, coming together to provide labor, to provide material, to restore their own monuments. And I think that is something that in the last 30 years, through my practice, I've worked on, and whether it's Punjab or Kashmir, working with local community. And unless we do that, we are not able to invest locally in a long term. And in talking about museums, I think even Chaumahala Palace, which was a community and a local partnership engaged project, but even state governments, if we look at Bharatpur Museum, which is a small town, and how that could put the museum on the map. Mr. Mukherjee was kind enough to appoint me 15 years ago for a master planning. But my point being that community and conservation now need to be going hand in hand, and whether it is converting a bus adda into a cultural hotspot of Delhi with Bikaner House, or looking at streetscaping in Dadabhai Nauroji Road, which was India's earliest streetscape project 25 years ago, where we went door to door, convinced local shopkeepers to realign their signboards, where we convinced local shopkeepers to pay for the street furniture. I think this is something that I worked on 25 years ago, but it still pains me that in our historic sites, we have this complete urban mess of chaotic signboards. And if the government of India starts using a system where states that apply for grants are also made to become signatories to cleaning up their urban precincts from the point of view of streetscaping. I'm a founder member of the Kala Ghoda Art District, and if we've been able to prove that funds can be put on even doesn't matter whether they're privately owned or public owned, but cleaning up the streetscape is restoring the public realm of a city, of a community. And what it does has long-term significations on the local pride, as well as portraying an area and making it culturally recognizable. So unfortunately, while we have Taj Mahal in Agra, that is not petering down to Agra and its urban development. We might have Shah Jahanabad and Red Fort as a World Heritage Site. But what are we doing to look at Purani Delhi and Shah Jahanabad and its Havelis? And I think when we inscribed Mumbai as a World Heritage Site in 1918, people asked me why I was working towards it, because there were 84 privately owned buildings. But the point is not that. If we can take one Bandra railway station and restore it, which is government heritage, but make it something that all of Mumbaikars are proud of, if we can looking at not just cultural spaces, which are technically museums and monuments, but take cultural heritage out to the city. What we are currently working on in Vadnagar is a very small aspect of that. That can we take a historic town, and we have so many across India. Look at Shekhawati, look at across every little region of Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. We don't unfortunately even have basic town and country planning acts to be able to appoint urban bylaws and conservation guidelines. And if we are able to use this as a tool, use Desh as a tool to encourage local cities, towns, villages to start looking holistically at urban heritage, only then can we start looking at streetscapes, because at the rate that we are losing our non-monumental privately owned heritage, we will not have anything to show for our historic towns in the next to the next generation. And therefore, merging this with some kind of government support for privately owned heritage, making sure that when historic towns are getting any funds, whether it is Ladakh or Vadnagar, local materials, local craftsmanship is to the fore. And in a way, this scheme and this idea is work in progress. And I'm very grateful to Secretary Culture, to the Ministry of Culture, and to the Honorable Prime Minister for drawing attention to it.
So we definitely have Vadnagar as a model that one can follow, and hopefully there will be more such models under the Desh scheme. I would like to thank all the panelists today who have given their valuable inputs, and we hope we will be able to incorporate all these in the scheme.
I'm really grateful to all the panelists, to the moderators, and to all the attendees who have taken up time to attend these parallel sessions, which are basically to focus on heritage and tourism, and also to look at creating systems and processes which have larger participation from all key stakeholders and take the momentum forward, and also create a mechanism where all of us work together in a more concerted way to achieve the outcomes which we have set out to achieve. It may be the Mera Gaon Meri Dharohar project, enhancing it to be built into a grid, looking at various digital assets that Ministry of Culture itself has, like the Indian Culture Portal, the Museums of India portal, the Vedic Heritage portal, and there are many more portals and websites and digital repositories, including Gyan Bharatam that is coming up, or Bharat Shri, that's a repository of epigraphs. So lots and lots of information is getting generated in different silos, which need to be brought under one grid and under one small language model to have a search tool, as was mentioned by one of the panelists, and then look at various other repositories of information that are with various institutions and private sector domains, which can also be integrated in the national grid. And this grid becomes one-stop shop for all the information that is required for understanding Indian culture, for looking at Indian destinations, for looking at facilities, connectivity, and other amenities for visitors to decide where they want to go, what they will be able to see there, what kind of experiences they can look forward to, what are the circuits that they can go around. So all that can come together if we can work in a proper manner. And I think lots of suggestions which have come are really valuable, which we have noted down, and we'll follow it up, and we'll also follow it up with all the individual panelists and the suggestion givers, so that we can take your practical inputs in implementing them. Similarly, for the infrastructure project that we are taking up for opening up the visitor amenities under the Desh scheme, again, this is an initiative which would require many hands to come together to become a success. So we are looking forward to this collaboration. We are looking forward to this partnership, and we are looking forward to making a very big impact by having all the key stakeholders on our side. Thank you very much. I hope the conversation continues and the work continues at a greater pace. Thank you very much. Jai Hind. Vande Mataram.
Thank you.